Chapter 179. Emperor's Resentment Demon? Jiang Shui opened her eyes wide and asked cautiously, will Xuanji encounter the Emperor's Resentment Demon? Also, will he become the Emperor's Resentment Demon? Daoya old man laughed. He shook his head and said, little girl, the Emperor's Resentment Demon is not something that can be transformed easily. Unless you stay in Juadi Cliff for a few years, or even decades, it is very difficult to transform. Those who went missing in Juadi Cliff were either killed by the Emperor's Resentment Demon or transformed into the Emperor's Resentment Demon. They would never be able to make a comeback. Don't worry. There aren't many Emperor's Resentment Demons in Juadi Cliff. After all, very few humans and demons enter Juadi Cliff. After they transform into Emperor's Resentment Demons, they don't know how to cultivate and will eventually exhaust themselves to death. Juadi Cliff is so big. It is very difficult to bump into the Emperor's Resentment Demon in just a few days. It is as difficult as picking up a level 7 Dharma artifact on the street. Daoya old man chuckled, letting Jiang Shui relax. The little black snake jumped up and said, this old man feels that this matter is not that simple. Daoya old man turned to look at it and asked with a smile, how so? Jiang Shui glared at it. What kind of demoralizing words did this fellow want to say? Wanzhong King Spectre, Xian Xianghua, what kind of people are they? They've been in there for so long, yet they still haven't come out. That ghost flood dragon hasn't called out for a long time. Don't you think something's wrong? The little black snake spat out its forked tongue and said in a solemn tone. Jiang Shui guessed, maybe they've both suffered heavy injuries. The little black snake did not reply and rolled its eyes at her. Daoya old man pinched his fingers to calculate, and his expression suddenly changed. Boom! Immortal General Xian was forced to kneel on the ground by a demonic palm. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and his face was filled with pain. Other than Immortal General Wang, who was still fighting, the other two Immortal Generals were also lying on the ground, suffering. Xian Xianghua floated in the air, surrounded by demonic qi. No matter how Divine General Wang attacked, he couldn't hurt her. You're too weak, yet you still dare to compete with me. Xian Xianghua laughed disdainfully. The number one expert in the world seemed to have returned. Divine General Wang's face was covered in blood. He gritted his teeth and said, Xian Xianghua, you're too arrogant. There will be retribution sooner or later. As he spoke, he raised his saber high and slashed out furiously. A terrifying saber qi that was hundreds of meters long swept out, scattering the wind and waves as if it wanted to cut the world in half. Xian Xianghua raised her right hand and flicked her index finger. The demonic aura transformed into black arrows that shot out and dispersed the saber aura. A strong wind howled through the earth, sweeping up countless sand and stones. I am indeed condescending. What can you do to me? Xian Xianghua smiled, completely disregarding Divine General Wang. At this moment, the ruins below suddenly exploded, and a 1,000-armed devil shadow rushed out of the ground, instantly attracting the attention of Xian Xianghua, Chen Tang, and Xian Wang. A black shadow rushed out from the dust, chasing after the 1,000 Hands shadow. It was Zhou Xuanji. Roar! A deafening dragon roar rang out. Zhou Xuanji was possessed by the God Emperor. White dragons coiled around his body, and dozens of legendary swords followed behind him. His eyes were blood red as he stepped on the wind cutter sword and executed the 8-step sword lunge. He appeared in front of Qin Gang and brandished the God Emperor sword and the white dragon bone sword. Twin swords like the wind. Unstoppable. Qin Gang blocked the swords clumsily with 2 metal rods in his hands. Is this brat really at Astral Infant? He was shocked. Zhou Xuanji's aura made him shudder. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji had already turned into a killing machine. He had lost his rationality and unleashed his full power, which was even more powerful than usual. All sorts of sword techniques were used instinctively, and Qin Gang could only defend. Of course, Qin Gang was confident that he could defeat Zhou Xuanji. But Zhou Xuanji was Xian Xianghua's baby. How could he dare to injure him? What happened? Xian Xianghua frowned. A murderous intent beamed out of her eyes as she asked with a deep voice. Suzerain. He's bewitched. He turned into the emperor's hatred demon. Qin Gang cried out in shock. He did not understand the situation either, but this was the only explanation. Having heard him, Xian Xianghua immediately dashed toward him. The 4 divine generals of Qin, Tang, Xian, and Wang gathered together. Could he be sword god Zhou? Legendary General Tang said with a frown. With so many legendary swords and someone related to Xian Xianghua, anyone would think of sword god Zhou. They really are in cahoots. Divine General Wang said with gritted teeth. When he returned, he would surely announce this to the world. At the same time, Zhou Xuanji's aura grew more and more violent. Each legendary sword unleashed its full power. The Frost Wave sword was enveloped in a cold chi, which froze the wind and waves. The Ghost Curse sword let out countless ghostly cries and wolf howls. The Hell King sword materialized the Hell King sword and attached itself to the blade. The Wicked Song sword and Heaven Sound sword let out a strange sound, which disturbed everyone's mind. Crimson Dragon Soul, Thunderous Thunder, Howling Wind, and so on. All the legendary swords charged toward Qin Gang, which made his expression change drastically. He immediately used his full power to block the legendary swords. The Thousand Hands shadow slammed its palms crazily, and the legendary swords fell one after another. Zhou Xuanji tossed out Hegemon Jiu. Ranged sword propelling. The sword pierced through the Thousand Hands shadow and flew 10,000 meters away, collapsing a tall mountain. This brat already has the power to fight against a spirit refinement cultivator. Why do I feel that he has become more powerful than when he faced Wang Hantian? Qin Gang thought in fear. Even with his full power, he could not gain the upper hand. Xian Xianghua stopped, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She was also shocked by Zhou Xuanji's power. Zhou Xuanji, who was bedeviled, unleashed his battle instincts completely. He attacked the Thousand Hands shadow like a ferocious devil, and the dozens of legendary swords were also fighting for themselves. Clang, the ordinary or grade bookcutter sword broke suddenly and disappeared into thin air. It was stored into the supreme storage by the sword spirit. Zhou Xuanji used the sky-dominating divine sword and slashed with both swords. A domineering sword chi blasted out. The heavens and earth changed color. The 4 legendary generals were shocked. They saw the Thousand Hands shadow being shattered by Zhou Xuanji's sword chi. The resulting violent gale swept across the surroundings. What sword technique is this? Legendary General Xian cried out in shock. That slash just now looked ordinary, but its lethality was too domineering. Most importantly, this brat was only at Astral Infant Level 3. Could it be? Xian Xianghua opened her eyes wide as well. She thought of the Hegemon Sword Emperor. How long has it been? Zhou Xuanji even learned the Hegemon Sword Emperor's ultimate technique? She had lived for 10,000 years and had witnessed the Hegemon Sword Emperor's prowess. An ordinary slash had the power to destroy the world. This was the way of the Hegemon sword. The swordplay was not flashy, but it was domineering. With a slash of the sword, all living things were terrifying, all techniques could be destroyed. Zhou Xuanji once again swung his sword, unleashing the sky-dominating divine sword. He slashed out 4 times in a row, and this was completed in the blink of an eye. Qin Gang instinctively dodged, but he was still hit by a sky-dominating sword chi. Pfft! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body fell like a meteor, smashing into the ground. Zhou Xuanji suddenly turned around and looked at Xian Xianghua. His eyes were blood-red and his pupils could not be seen. His face was savage and looked incredibly horrifying. Without any hesitation, he charged toward Xian Xianghua. 1,000 meters away, 2 figures were strolling over. They were the twin devils of Huang Quan. Emperor's resentment demon? Perfect, I can refine him into a corpse puppet. One of the men, who was holding a broadsword, grinned cruelly. He saw Zhou Xuanji as his prey. Chapter 180. The Huangquan twin devils stared at Zhou Xuanji as they walked toward him, talking and laughing. Qin, Tang, Xian, and Wang noticed the arrival of Huangquan twin devils. They could not help but frown. What should we do now? General Tang said with a deep voice. With Xian Xianghua above, the Huangquan twin devils came again. With their injuries, they were in a precarious situation. Zhou Xuanji was already in front of Xian Xianghua, but he could not break through the demonic qi to hurt Xian Xianghua despite his frenzy. Having lost his mind, he did not know how to retreat. Xian Xianghua saw the Huangquan twin devils and immediately wrapped Zhou Xuanji with her demonic qi, sealing him into a black ball. She retreated with Zhou Xuanji, and Qin Gang, who was far away, quickly followed. Qin, Tang, and Xian Wang did not pursue. They left in another direction. Both parties did not mention the Tianxia map, as though it was not their goal. The Huangquan twin devils looked at each other and followed the four legendary generals silently. General Chen noticed their actions and cursed softly, "You think we are pushovers?" Would the four legendary generals be afraid of the Huangquan twin devils? Let them follow and find an opportunity to kill them later. If we kill the Huangquan twin devils, the reputation of our Chen, Tang, and Xian Wang will be even greater. General Xian said coldly. His eyes sparkled as he began to plan. The other three legendary generals nodded. Reputation was very important to them as it could increase their fate. The stronger their fate, the shorter the time for the Hunyuan Empire to become a great fate empire. On the other side, Xian Xianghua brought Zhou Xuanji to a valley. There were few plants in Juadi Cliff. The walls of the valley were barren and filled with skeletons. Qin Gang landed and walked up to Xian Xianghua. He knelt down and said with gritted teeth, "I'm useless. I failed to protect the vice suzerain." Bomb! A wave of demonic qi hit him and sent him flying. He smashed into the wall and shook the valley. Xian Xianghua stared at Zhou Xuanji, who was shrouded in demonic qi. Zhou Xuanji's limbs and neck were shrouded in demonic qi. His legendary swords were trembling as well, trying to break free from the demonic qi. What happened? Why did he become the Emperor's hatred demon? It shouldn't be. To become an Emperor's hatred demon, one had to stay in Juadi Cliff for years or even decades. How long had Zhou Xuanji been here? Could it be related to the Tianxia map? She raised her right hand and sucked in the air. Qin Gang flew to her. "Hurry up and say it." Xian Xianghua's eyes were cold as she spoke in a low voice. Qin Gang did not dare to hide anything and told him everything in detail. After hearing this, Xian Xianghua grabbed his neck and said, "Are you really loyal, or do you have other intentions? How can you obtain a treasure like the Tianxia map so easily?" Qin Gang's face turned red from being pinched. He said with difficulty, "His cultivation base is not weak either. I really don't dare to get my hands on the Tianxia map. I'm afraid I'll have evil intentions." Xian Xianghua put him down and looked at Zhou Xuanji again. Qin Gang asked cautiously, "Sect leader, what should we do next?" She answered, "What else can we do? The great emperor's resentment in Juadi Cliff is unsolvable. We can only wait for him to wake up or die of exhaustion." Hearing this, Qin Gang broke out in cold sweat. If Zhou Xuanji died, he would not survive either. The two of them meditated in front of the ball of demonic qi and did not speak. They were both thinking of ways to save Zhou Xuanji. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed. "Old demon Xian, so you are here. Tisk tsk. This old demonic woman's flesh must be very nutritious." The Huangquan twin devil's voice came suddenly. Xian Xianghua and Qin Gang looked up and saw that they were standing on the mountain top and looking down. Their faces were hideous, like demons looking at their prey. After saying this, Xian Xianghua flew up and said, "Look after him." Her demonic chi formed into two black fans. She waved them quickly, and billowing black flames swept out like waves. The Huangquan twin devils leaped up into the sky and dodged the black flames. One of the Huangquan fiends, who was holding two swords, laughed coldly, "Xian Xianghua, you are no longer at your pinnacle. If we can kill you here today, our names will shake the world and strengthen the name of Huangquan." After that, he swung his swords. His sword chi turned into countless red flowers and fell down like a downpour. The other Huangquan fiend slashed with his blade. The two of them were extremely imposing, as though they were going to flatten all the mountains around them. Xian Xianghua's eyes were cold. The demonic chi around her exploded and spread out, blocking the Huangquan twin devils' attack. After that, she pushed upward. She waved her fans, and two waves of black flames swept out like dragons, forcing the Huangquan twin devils to back off. And so, Xian Xianghua forced the Huangquan twin devils to back off forcefully and shifted the battlefield far away. Qin Gang was worried about her injuries, but he was not powerful enough. Even if he joined the battle, he would not be of much help. He turned to look at Zhou Xuanji, who was still struggling in the demonic qi. It seemed like he would struggle for a long time. Loud rumbling sounds echoed from afar. The chaotic battle between the three top powerhouses of the demonic path was simply too great. Even though they were far away, the ground still trembled. At this moment, streaks of white light shot out from the ball of demonic qi, and Zhou Xuanji's deep roar came from within. Tianxia map. Slaughter all living beings. Qin Gang opened his eyes wide and stepped back instinctively. Boom! The sword qi destroyed the ball of demonic qi. Zhou Xuanji charged out like a ferocious beast, and the two glorious gold legendary swords slashed toward Qin Gang with unstoppable force. Qin Gang instinctively conjured the Thousand Hands shadow to block. However, just when the Thousand Hands shadow appeared, it was slashed into pieces by the two swords. The God Emperor sword followed the momentum and cut off his right arm. Blood splattered. Qin Gang opened his eyes wide and were filled with disbelief. How did he become so much more powerful? He was appalled in his heart and immediately escaped with his earth-tunneling spell. Zhou Xuanji, who was bedeviled, could not use his mind. He looked around for the aura of living beings. Soon, he flew toward another direction. Xian Xianghua, who was fighting with the Huangquan twin devils, frowned slightly. She had already sensed that Zhou Xuanji had escaped, but she had no time to deal with him. She could only think of a way to defeat the Huangquan twin devils first. 100 miles away. Qin Gang crawled out from the ground. He leaned against a giant rock and began to heal his wounds. The pain of losing his arm made his forehead covered in cold sweat. But he did not panic, because it was not the first time he suffered such an injury. Tianxia map. Slaughter all living beings. That thing is really the Tianxia map. Qin Gang mumbled to himself. He suddenly remembered some legends about the Tianxia map, and he looked terrified. On the other side of Juadi Cliff, on the top of a small mountain, 7 men were resting. 5 of them were men and 2 of them were women. One of them wore a luxurious red robe and had an imposing appearance. He shook his wine gourd and asked with a chuckle, "Yalong, Great Zhou's reputation is not good recently. Will it affect your ascension to the throne?" Zhou Yalong, the crown prince of Great Zhou. He had a handsome face and was dressed in a tight-fitting black shirt. Although the accessories on his body were not extravagant, he gave off a noble aura. He said softly, "Of course not. But for Great Zhou, I must fight for the Tianxia map." Chapter 181. Tianxia map. When Zhou Yalong mentioned this name, the eyes of the other 6 people flickered. They were the successors of the dynasties and the successors of the sacred grounds. Their cultivation bases were all at the spirit refinement realm. They came today because they had obtained the map of the Tianxia map. No one could resist the temptation of the Tianxia map. Even the Son of Heaven. However, it would be difficult for them to obtain the Tianxia map with their abilities. Thus, they decided to work together to obtain the Tianxia map and share it. They all knew that it was impossible for them to share the Tianxia map. Once they succeeded, a fierce battle was bound to erupt among the 7 of them. Zhou Yalong looked at the man in red and said with a smile, "Brother Liang, you are also the crown prince of Donghan and are 300 years older than me. This trip to Juadi Cliff will depend on you." Liang Yu was the heir apparent of the Donghan Empire. His reputation was not inferior to Zhou Yalong's. Faced with Zhou Yalong's flattery, Liang Yu smiled and said, "Well said, well said. I can't do it alone. We have to work together to obtain the Tianxia map. Once we succeed, we will be in the limelight." Everyone smiled, but in their hearts, they didn't think much of it. Who would spread the news after obtaining the Tianxia map? Wasn't he just looking for trouble for himself? Whoosh! Right at this moment, the sound of tearing through the air sounded out. It was Zhou Xuanji. With the God Emperor's sword and the white dragon-bone sword in his hands, and dozens of divine swords behind him, he roared and charged at Zhou Yalong, Liang Yu, and the rest. The 7 of them quickly got up in shock. What a terrifying killing intent! One of them, a woman in a green dress, exclaimed. Her pretty face was filled with fear. Liang Yu took out a 4-foot-long silver sword and slashed. The crescent-shaped sword qi was hundreds of meters long and slammed into Zhou Xuanji with extreme speed. The white dragon wrapped around the God Emperor's sword bit the sword qi in half in an overbearing manner. Liang Yu's expression changed drastically, and so did the others. Zhou Xuanji stepped on the wind-cutter sword and used the 8-step sword lunge. He came to the top of the 7 people's heads with a single step and used the Soul Eater slash. The sword qi descended, and the 7 people dodged immediately, but some were still injured. Boom! The hill they were on collapsed. The crazed Zhou Xuanji's eyes became even bigger than before. They were completely blood-red in color, almost to the point of solidifying into a red glow. He unleashed all sorts of sword techniques, madly chasing after Zhou Yalong and the others. Liang Yu closed in on Zhou Xuanji, intending to suppress him. However, now that Zhou Xuanji had the Tianxia map's power, he was able to send him flying back and vomiting blood in less than 3 strikes. The others were shocked to the core. Where did this guy come from? Someone exclaimed. They were all at the spirit refinement realm. Could it be that this person was a Mahayana cultivator? However, there were only so many Mahayana realm cultivators in the northern wilderness region, and they could basically recognize all of them. Zhou Yalong quickly dodged and distanced himself from Zhou Xuanji. Why does this guy feel so familiar? Zhou Yalong frowned and thought. He came to Juadi Cliff for the Tianxia map, not to fight to the death with the demons. He immediately arrived before Liang Yu, grabbed his shoulder, and left swiftly. The others also fled one after another. Perhaps they could not defeat Zhou Xuanji, but they all had their own ways of escaping. Soon, they all disappeared without a trace. Zhou Xuanji also stood where he was and looked around. Just as he was about to move, all the divine swords suddenly revolved around him at high speed, forming a strong gust of wind. His face was ferocious, and his blood-red eyes were faintly discernible. He gritted his teeth, and it was obvious that he was struggling. At this moment, there were 2 voices fighting in his mind. With the Tianxia map, the world will be yours. All lives will be ants in your palm. Warning, sword owner. An evil spirit is trying to possess your body. The Tianxia map is a rare opportunity that can conquer the world. Warning, sword owner. An evil spirit is trying to possess your body. Zhou Xuanji's consciousness was struggling like never before. Countless complicated memories flashed across his mind. There were memories of his past life and his current life. The legendary swords around him flew faster and faster. They gathered the spiritual qi of the world and channeled it into his body. The legendary swords were protecting their master. The god emperor on his body roared into the sky, and its might shook the heavens. The white dragon was also moving swiftly, as though it was swimming in the ocean. Sometime later, Zhou Xuanji landed slowly under the protection of the legendary swords. He opened his eyes. The blood-red color in his eyes receded quickly, revealing his pupils. He regained his consciousness. What's going on? Zhou Xuanji frowned and mumbled to himself. The voice in his mind was still ringing, tempting him to control the Tianxia map. An evil spirit is in the Tianxia map. It is trying to possess the sword owner's body. The sword spirit reminded, which made him break out in a cold sweat. Could the Tianxia map be a lie? He immediately looked into his body and tried to find the Tianxia map in his body. However, the Tianxia map seemed to have vanished into thin air. The Tianxia map has merged with the sword owner. The sword spirit is trying to kill the evil spirit. Please wait patiently. The sword owner can also help the sword spirit to kill the evil spirit. The sword spirit spoke again. His tone was still emotionless. How can I help? Train with the sword. Zhou Xuanji was stunned. Could training with the sword strengthen the sword spirit? He took up the 2 glorious gold legendary swords and began to perform the vibrant raindrop sword and 36 paths jade shao sword on the spot. After performing the sword techniques again and again, his consciousness became clearer. He Geminjiu swung his sword in the air. It was the white crane sword technique. The white crane sword technique was the sword technique that Zhou Xuanji had practiced for the longest time. With the guidance of his consciousness, he could use the white crane sword technique even without holding the legendary swords. Next, the Hell King's sword began to move as well. It was using the Trisource vein severing sword. With the Tianxia map, you can obtain, the voice in his mind grew weaker and weaker. Zhou Xuanji became more clear-headed and refreshed. You want to possess me? Go to hell. Zhou Xuanji thought fiercely. He swung his sword even faster. The sand and rocks around him were swept up by the wind generated by his sword. It was a spectacular sight. After a few hundred rounds of sword techniques. Ah. Who are you? You can counterattack the old ancestor. An insidious and panic-stricken voice resounded in his mind. After that, it stopped. The evil spirit has been successfully killed. The sword spirit's voice came, which made Zhou Xuanji heave a sigh of relief. He immediately sheathed his sword. At this moment, he felt a burning sensation in his right palm. He immediately put down the God Emperor's sword and looked at his palm. Thin lines of ink appeared on his palm, drawing a magnificent picture of mountains and rivers. Tianxia map. Zhou Xuanji's eyes focused. When he focused on the Tianxia map, his consciousness suddenly exploded. Next, he felt that the world around him was spinning, and the world around him disappeared. At the same time, he closed his eyes slowly. He sat down with his legs crossed and began to meditate. His consciousness came to another scene. He stood above the clouds and looked down at the world. Below him was a wasteland. Countless soldiers knelt on the wasteland. They were densely packed and occupied a radius of 100 miles. They were all worshipping one person. That person stood on the top of the mountain and sat on the throne. He wore an emperor's robe and a crown. Behind him was a 5-clawed golden dragon, which was extraordinarily majestic. He smiled proudly and said, "The world is in my hands. Who can stand against me?" Chapter 182. This is? Zhou Xuanji looked quite confused. His gaze locked onto the great emperor who was wildly laughing below, and his mind wandered. Could this be the memory of the owner of the Tianxia map? The 5-clawed golden dragon roared into the sky. The great monarch slowly stood up. He raised his right hand, and a scroll flew out from his palm. It unfurled, and a phantom image appeared from the scroll. Magnificent mountains and rivers appeared above the great emperor's head. He looked down at the billions of people kneeling before him and said with a smile, This is the Tianxia map. If you obtain it, you can obtain the world. I will grant you eternal life. As soon as he finished speaking, the illusory image of the mountains and rivers above his head suddenly burst forth with 7-colored light. The soldiers kneeling on the wasteland were all sucked into the air and quickly swept towards the illusionary mountains and rivers. Once they got close to the illusionary mountains and rivers, their bodies quickly shrunk to the size of rice grains and were sucked into the Tianxia map. Ah, what is this? Your Majesty. Please let us go. Help. Why are you doing this? We are your soldiers. Damn it. Supremacy, you will die a horrible death. Countless curses and cries resounded, and it was like purgatory on earth. Zhou Xuanji frowned. He felt quite disgusted with this great emperor for treating his subordinates like this. Could it be that the evil spirit in the Tianxia map was this great emperor? At this moment, heaven and earth spun again. Next, Zhou Xuanji appeared under the thunderclouds. Below him, the ocean surged with destructive waves, and numerous mountain peaks appeared. The sea drowns the heavens and earth. On one of the mountain peaks, an elder in a tattered gray robe stood. He raised his arms, and the Tianxia map floated above his head. His face was full of all kinds of black scars, and he had a crazy smile on his face. Tianxia map. I got the Tianxia map. This world belongs to me. Ha ha ha, he laughed maniacally, causing thunder to rumble. Zhou Xuanji shook his head. This was crazy. Was the Tianxia map that good? At this moment, the surroundings changed again. Then, he saw many scenes of people controlling the Tianxia map. Those great emperors and old ancestors were all in a frenzied state. They even massacred the common people. Apart from madness, he also felt something else. The one who obtained the Tianxia map would obtain the world. This was not a false statement. The experts who owned the Tianxia map all had the strength to look down on the world. All living beings are enemies, and all living beings are not enemies. He treated all living beings as his enemies, but all living beings were not qualified to be his enemies. Zhou Xuanji had an indescribable epiphany. However, his temperament had also transformed because of this. He understood what it meant to be invincible in the world. The number one in the world was just the strongest. To be invincible in the world was to be the strongest. Even if the entire human world joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to match him. After a long while, he slowly opened his eyes. The sky was already dark, and thunder clouds were rolling above him. Boundless spiritual energy gathered from all directions and poured into his body. He was stunned, because he was still in a cultivation posture. He clearly did not have this consciousness. Was it the sword spirit or the Tianxia map? Then, his expression suddenly changed. This cultivation speed was more than 10 times faster than his usual speed. He subconsciously looked down at his right palm. The Tianxia map was faintly discernible. How do I control it? Zhou Xuanji was confused. In the illusion he saw, those powerful cultivators looked so majestic with the Tianxia map. He also wanted to use it that way. But it was a pity that no matter what he did, he could not draw the Tianxia map out of his palm. The Tianxia map possesses power that transcends the mortal realm. The sword owner's cultivation is too weak, so you cannot use it now. However, this treasure can help the sword owner in his cultivation. When the sword owner is in danger, it will protect the sword owner. The sword spirit explained in his mind, which made him feel a little regretful. At this moment, his cultivation broke through suddenly. Astral Infant Level 4. I broke through just like that. Zhou Xuanji squinted his eyes and felt the surging spirit energy in his body. He was a little dissatisfied. It was an ultimate treasure in the world, after all. It should at least help him break through to astral projection, right? He shook his head and stored all the legendary swords around him into the supreme storage. At this moment, he felt that he was in his best condition. He even felt that his potential had been stimulated. Now, He might have the power to fight against the sword monarch of Great Zhou and Huang Hantian. No, the sword monarch was nothing. Huang Hantian was someone who could fight against Lin Guanyu. Their cultivation might be similar, but there was a huge difference in their battle prowess. This was normal. Everyone's talent in battle was different. For example, Zhou Xuanji could already fight against a spirit refinement cultivator when he was at the astral infant stage. The day he reached astral projection would be the day he would rule over Great Zhou and take revenge for Huang Lianxin. After the thought, he began to regulate his qi flow. Half an hour later, he got up slowly with a smile on his face. He experimented just now. Once he started cultivating, the Tianxia map would take effect and increase his internalization of qi by 10 times. It felt good. His cultivation speed was already fast, and with the help of the Tianxia map, it felt even better. He left on his sword to look for Xian Xianghua. Xian Xianghua was being harassed by the Huangquan twin devils, so he could not leave just like that. If not for Xian Xianghua, he would not have gotten the Tianxia map. PFFTTTTTTTTT, Xian Xianghua vomited a mouthful of blood and almost blew off her veil. She covered her abdomen with her right hand and held a black fan with her left. Around her was a pile of rubble, and dust was rising like smoke. 100 meters away, the Huangquan twin devils were severely injured as well. One of them was lying on the ground, while the other lost his left arm. They were still staring at Xian Xianghua fiercely. Xian Xianghua, you deserve this. If you continue to fight like this, we will exhaust you to death. One of the devils stabilized his body with the saber in his hand. He grinned sinisterly as if he was going to eat Xian Xianghua alive. Xian Xianghua's eyes were cold. You want to kill me? Even your master, the Huangquan Drake King, does not dare to speak so arrogantly. When the Huangquan Drake King knelt before me and begged for mercy, did you see it? The Huangquan twin devils' faces turned ugly when they heard that. This was Xian Xianghua. Not only did she have to defeat her opponent, but she also had to scold them. She was ruthless and talkative. Far away, Qin Gang lay on the mountain top with a look of despair. He mumbled, it's over, it's over. If Xian Xianghua died, the Tanhua sect would cease to exist. He was loyal to the Tanhua sect and was ready to die. Xian Xianghua, no one can save you today. Not even the Tanhua sect worm over there. The Huangquan twin devils stood up and walked toward Xian Xianghua. Xian Xianghua took a deep breath, and her eyes gradually turned purple. Who said that no one can save you? At this moment, Zhou Xuanji's voice resounded across the heavens and earth. With the God Emperor sword and white dragonbone sword in his hands, he flew over on Hegemonjiu. The God Emperor Qi wrapped around his body and coalesced into the God Emperor. A divine white dragon coiled around the God Emperor and looked extremely imposing. Seeing him, Xian Xianghua was stunned, and Qin Gang was even more stunned. The Huangquan twin devils frowned. Isn't this guy the Emperor's hatred demon? Why can he speak? Numerous legendary swords appeared behind Zhou Xuanji. He looked at Xian Xianghua and smiled. Are you in a good mood now? Chapter 183. Facing Zhou Xuanji's question, Xian Xianghua smiled. Back then, at Great Chen's border custom, when she saved Zhou Xuanji, she had said these words. Kid, you want to be a hero and save the beauty? Why don't you measure your own strength first? The blade-wielding Huangquan demon laughed disdainfully and immediately walked toward Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji smiled and came to the Huangquan twin devils' heads with the 8-step sword lunge. The two swords slashed down furiously. Sky-dominating divine sword. Tyrannical sword qi. The Huangquan twin devils' expressions changed drastically, and they immediately dodged. There was a loud bang. A huge crack that was hundreds of meters long and several meters wide appeared on the ground. If it was a little deeper, it would have formed a canyon. Xian Xianghua frowned and murmured, how did this brat become stronger again? She could tell that although Zhou Xuanji's cultivation had only increased by 1 level, his power had doubled. Did this brat already control the Tianxia map? After the Huangquan twin devils landed, they looked at Zhou Xuanji with a dark expression. They had battled with Xian Xianghua for a long time and had used up most of their spirit energy. They were also injured. Although they were confident that they could defeat Zhou Xuanji, Chen, Tang, Xian Wang, and Wanzhong King's Spectre were still in Juadi Cliff. The two of them looked at each other and saw through each other's thoughts. Sword God Zhou, the hatred between you and Huang Quan has been established. With that, the Huang Quan twin devils left, disappearing from where they stood. In the next second, they appeared behind Qin Gang. Qin Gang turned around instinctively, but his vision went black as he was knocked out by the Huang Quan twin devils. Xian Xianghua, Thousand Hands Devil has been taken away by us. If you want to save him, bring the Tianxia map to us. The longer it drags on, the more painful it will be for him. In 10 years at most, we'll kill him. The Huangquan twin devil's voice rang out again, but it didn't cause the expression in Xian Xianghua's eyes to change. She slowly sat down and began to heal. Zhou Xuanji could no longer track the Huangquan twin devil's aura. He landed in front of Xian Xianghua and asked, "What should we do?" He had a good impression of Qin Gang. Although this guy was from the evil path, in terms of loyalty, not many people could compare to him, even among the people of the righteous path. Let me recover first. Even if she wanted to save Qin Gang now, she would not be able to. Zhou Xuanji frowned but did not say anything. He could only mourn for Qin Gang. Blue sky and white clouds. In a forest, an old man in a Taoist robe was slowly moving forward. He held a compass in his hand. His hair was white, and he was tall and sturdy. He had thick eyebrows and eagle-like eyes. There was a black grain of sand between his eyebrows. With every step he took, he covered a distance of 10 feet. It had the wondrous effect of shrinking the ground into inches. When the fallen leaves touched him, they fell to the ground as if they had touched a shadow. The Tianxia map has an owner? How is this possible? He frowned and muttered to himself. His expression was a little ugly. The compass in his hand emitted a burst of golden light, and the needle inside spun rapidly. He immediately stopped and sat down on the ground. It has only been a few years since I released the map, and someone has already obtained the Tianxia map? That shouldn't be the case. Even if they find the Tianxia map, the great emperor's soul inside will devour their souls. It's impossible for the Tianxia map to recognize them as its owner. He muttered to himself with an anxious look on his face. After thinking for a moment, he closed his eyes and began to calculate with his fingers. After a while, he suddenly opened his eyes, his forehead sweating. He took a deep breath and murmured, 10,000 swords in the sky, number 1 in the world. Who is he? No. I must go to Juadi Cliff. He immediately got up and disappeared on the spot. At Juadi Cliff. An hour after the Huangquan twin devils left, Xian Xianghua's injuries finally recovered a little. She opened her eyes and asked, "You have already obtained the Tianxia map?" Having heard her, Zhou Xuanji, who was standing guard nearby, turned around and replied, "Yes." Xian Xianghua squinted her eyes. Zhou Xuanji looked at her quietly and thought to himself, "This old demonic woman won't go back on her words, right?" She continued to speak, "Let's go. It's time to leave. The Tianxia map is just a trap. If it's only you, it might be a serendipity. But the Huangquan twin devils and Wanzhong King's Spectre are here. Along the way, I saw others searching for the Tianxia map. This is not a good thing." After that, she waved her right hand. Demonic chi rose from the ground and swept Zhou Xuanji away. Within the demonic chi, Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown, "Aren't you looking for healing medicine? And Qin Gang, are you not going to save him?" Xian Xianghua said calmly, "It's better to leave as soon as possible. The Huangquan twin devils are sly and cunning. They captured Qin Gang because they wanted to leave. Do you think the 10-year period is limited to Juadi Cliff? Zhou Xuanji's frown deepened. Even the top evil cultivator, the Huangquan twin devils, retreated. Who was the one who set this up? Using the Tianxia map as a chess piece, what was the person trying to do? Could it be to attract all the powerful cultivators in the world to feed the evil spirit? You obtained the Tianxia map and solved the trap. But you also created a huge disaster. The person who dared to set up this trap must be an ancient monster. Be careful in the future. Xian Xianghua reminded him. The other party could find the Tianxia map and even use it. His cultivation was definitely not simple. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He understood. But he had enough enemies, and he was used to it. Next, he needed to focus on his cultivation and study the Tianxia map. Half an hour later, Zhou Xuanji landed, and the demonic qi dissipated. They landed on a hill. Looking down, they could see Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others. The group saw them too and immediately rushed up with cheers. Jiang Shui hugged Zhou Xuanji and even picked him up, spinning him around on the spot. Did you obtain the Tianxia map? Daoya old man asked. Zhou Xuanji pressed down on Jiang Shui's head and smiled, yes. Seeing how intimate they were, Xian Xianghua, who was not far away, snorted softly and walked down the hill. The others began to ask questions all at once. Zhou Xuanji told them everything he knew. Knowing that so many powerful cultivators were searching for the Tianxia map, everyone became anxious. Let's run quickly. The little black snake urged anxiously. It looked back occasionally, fearing that the Huangquan twin devils would come after them. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, pack up and leave quickly. Soon. Everyone packed up, and the group quickly flew away. Obtaining the Tianxia map from this trip to Juadi Cliff was already their biggest gain. During their flight, Daoya old man came to a big side and said to Zhou Xuanji, who was on its back, Emperor Yan of Zhou is about to ascend. I calculated the time. His end should be in 3 years. Zhou Xuanji glanced at him and asked back, what does that have to do with me? Jiang Shui nodded and said, Xuanji doesn't want to be the emperor. If he ascends, then so be it. Daoya old man shook his head and smiled bitterly. Did this kid really not understand, or was he pretending not to? What he means is very simple. The Great Zhou dynasty is a dynasty of fortune. Once Zhou Yalong ascends to the throne, the fortune of the nation will pour into him and his cultivation will skyrocket. At that time, he will use all the power of the dynasty to hunt you down. Xian Xianghua's voice rang out, her tone filled with disdain. It was just the Great Zhou dynasty. Daoya old man could hear the disdain in her voice. He curled his lips and did not reply. Perhaps in 3 years, I will be able to charge into the Great Zhou dynasty. Zhou Xuanji said with a smile. With the Tianxia map, he could cultivate for 3 years, which was equivalent to 30 years of cultivation before. As long as he reached the leaving aperture realm, he was confident that he would be able to sweep through the entire spirit ascension realm. Perhaps it could even contend against low-level Mahayana stage beings. Chapter 184. Half a month later. Zhou Xuanji and the others came to a waterfall and settled down. The surrounding 100 miles were surrounded by forests, and the scenery was beautiful. Beixiao Wangjian, Han Shenhua, and Xiao Jinghong went to build the wooden houses. Jiang Shui and Huang Lianxin also began to choose suitable places to settle down. Zhou Xuanji looked at Xian Xianghua and said, all right, we're even now. It's time for you to leave. He had saved Xian Xianghua and did not want to have anything to do with her anymore. Xian Xianghua stared at him and faintly said, do you really want me to leave? Yes. Zhou Xuanji said straightforwardly. With Xian Xianghua by his side, the others felt quite unnatural. Moreover, this fellow's hatred was simply too great, and who knew when enemies would attack. Hearing that, Xian Xianghua snorted and said, then I won't leave. Unless you come with me, I will impart the Tianhua sect's ultimate technique to you, allowing you to be invincible in the world for 1,000 years, and even giving you the position of the sect master in the future. These words were enough to move most people. After all, the Tianhua sect was once an existence that dominated the northern wilderness region. It had a deep foundation and could be ranked in the top 5 among the countless forces in the northern wilderness region. Are you thinking of luring me over so that the ancient Diablo can possess me? Zhou Xuanji asked with a smile that did not seem like a smile. Ever since he was possessed by the evil spirit in the Tianxia map, he had become extremely sensitive to this matter. He didn't want to become the tragic main character in some kind of plot, allowing some expert to be reborn and rule over the world, living a happy life. Xian Xianghua looked at him deeply, causing his heart to palpitate. Holy shit! Could it be that he had guessed her thoughts? He immediately became alert and prepared to fight at any time. Xian Xianghua didn't say anything. She turned around and quickly disappeared into the forest. Daoya old man appeared beside Zhou Xuanji and said in amazement, you are the first person who dared to speak to her like this and is still alive. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes and said, it's my honor. He then asked, how much do you know about her? Can you tell me about it? Xian Xianghua seemed to have a good impression of him, but he felt that it was unreal. The dignified number 1 person of the demonic path, someone who had lived for over 10,000 years, would fall in love with him? I don't even dare to write that, okay? Daoya old man immediately told him what he knew about Xian Xianghua. 10,000 years ago, the ancient Diablo fought with the hegemon sword emperor and was defeated time and time again. When he finally reached his peak, the hegemon sword emperor had already ascended, and he became the number 1 in the world. He was a playboy by nature and had many wives and concubines. He had many children, and Xian Xianghua was one of them. The ancient Diablo king was very harsh to his children. Many of his children died suddenly while cultivating, and Xian Xianghua was one of the few who survived. The cruelest thing was that the ancient evil king forced each of his children to personally kill their own mothers before they ventured into the world and cast away the last shred of compassion in their hearts. Since then, a few more demons appeared in the northern wilderness region. Later on, the Holy Lands worked together to kill the ancient Diablo, returning peace to the northern wilderness region. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. In less than 2,000 years, Xian Xianghua's demonic technique was mastered, and she dominated the world, leading the Tianhua sect to new heights. She was even more cruel and tyrannical than the ancient Diablo. She brought disaster to the world and plunged the people into misery and suffering. Even the demon race had to avoid her. After that, it was the legend of Xian Xianghua's invincibility. Zhou Xuanji understood now. No wonder Xian Xianghua loved to make up stories about killing her parents. This old demonic woman's childhood must have been filled with trauma. Somehow, he felt a little sad for Xian Xianghua. This old demonic woman had never shown weakness before him. Even when she was severely injured, she was still arrogant. Behind her power, countless tears and blood were piled up. He quickly adjusted his emotions and said, "Let's be careful during this period of time. What if she sets a trap for us?" He was afraid that Xian Xianghua would lure a group of powerful cultivators from the righteous sects here. Moreover, he was the vice suzerain of the Tianhua sect, and if that happened, he would not be able to clear his name. Daoya old man nodded and said, "There are few people around here. You can focus on your cultivation." Zhou Xuanji had always wanted to focus on cultivation, but the world was unpredictable. There were always some things that changed his plans. After that, Zhou Xuanji walked to the lakeside and sat down. He gathered the ink for the Tianxia map in his right hand and began internalizing qi. He cultivated along the way. In half a month, he discovered another use of the Tianxia map. That was to store spirit energy. Zhou Xuanji could channel his spirit energy into the Tianxia map. If he expended too much spirit energy during a battle, the Tianxia map could provide him with spirit energy at any time. If he could store it every day, one day, he would have unlimited spirit energy. Now, he could rely on his many legendary swords to fight those at a higher stage than him. However, he did not have enough spirit energy, so he could not last long. The Tianxia map could solve this problem. No wonder the Tianxia map is so attractive. This is only one of its uses. TSK. Zhou Xuanji thought happily. This risk was worth it. In the following period of time, the group stayed at the same place. Daoya Old Man began to patrol Chongming Demon Monarch, the little black snake, a big, small heir, and the three-eyed drought rodent. Their happy days had come to an end. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, Beishao Wangjian, and Huang Lianxin also began to cultivate diligently. Zhou Xuanji taught each of them a different sword technique. With his personal guidance, the speed at which the four of them improved their sword techniques greatly. Under Zhou Xuanji's forceful invitation, Jiang Shui cultivated with him every day. Because of the Tianxia map, her cultivation speed also increased. Although it was not as fast as Zhou Xuanji's 10 times increase, it was at least 3 times faster. Han Shenhua's cultivation had been completely restored, and he was now beginning to break through to a higher realm. The atmosphere of the whole team was very positive. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 months had passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 5. After Xian Xianghua left, she never returned. Every half a month, Zhou Xuanji would send Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, and Han Shenhua out to gather information. 6,000 li away, there was a city that did not belong to any dynasty or empire. It was under the protection of a sect, and from there, one could understand the situation of the world. Currently, the 2 hottest topics were Emperor Yan of Zhou's ascension and Juadi Cliff. The matter regarding the Tianxia map was exposed. Now that the entire world knew that the Tianxia map was hidden in Juadi Cliff, many first-rate experts flocked to Juadi Cliff. After Zhou Xuanji knew about it, he rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he escaped quickly. In addition, Xian Xianghua disappeared without a trace, and there was no more news about her. Time continued to pass. More than 3 months passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 6, which made the others envious. The Tianxia map was indeed powerful. They were not jealous because Zhou Xuanji treated them really well after all. Whatever sword techniques they wanted to learn, Zhou Xuanji would not be stingy. However, before they learned a sword technique, they could not learn more. This day, Daoya Old Man suddenly sat down beside Zhou Xuanji and said softly, "I feel that something is wrong. When I divined your fates just now, I sensed someone else's divine will. Someone is watching you." Chapter 185. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and glanced at him with a strange expression. Isn't this normal? He had so many enemies. Was there something wrong with divining him? Daoya Old Man frowned and said, "That divine sense is very powerful. There are not many people who can surpass me in the northern wilderness region. They are all powerful hermits or old immortals. No matter who they are, once they set their eyes on us, we will be at a disadvantage." Zhou Xuanji could hear his worry and comforted him, "Don't worry. If they can divine us, we will be found no matter where we go. It's better to focus on cultivation and increase our power." Daoya Old Man thought about it and nodded. But he was still worried, so he got up and left. He was prepared to set up a barrier around the area to block divine senses. Zhou Xuanji shook his head with a smile and continued to cultivate. All he wanted now was to break through to astral projection as soon as possible. When that time came, he would no longer have to hide. Jiang Shui walked over with a grilled fish and sat beside him. "Xuanji, eat some first," she said. With their cultivation, they could already abstain from food and did not need to eat. But they still loved the taste of food and could not give it up. Zhou Xuanji took the grilled fish and asked, "How's your cultivation going?" He took a bite. The fish skin was fragrant and crispy, and the meat was tender and smooth. The texture was excellent. This girl's cooking was getting better. Jiang Shui tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "The wood rejuvenation technique is a little difficult, but I'm confident that I can master it. When that time comes, I can heal you guys even faster." Zhou Xuanji smiled satisfactorily and patted her head. "You are already a qualified nanny." Jiang Shui blushed and stared at him. "I'm still a virgin. Don't talk nonsense." She looked at Zhou Xuanji with a tinge of resentment. "Why? Are you in a hurry to marry me?" Zhou Xuanji raised his brow and asked. Their relationship was already clear, but they had not broken through that barrier. After all, they were not married yet. Now that they were homeless, Zhou Xuanji did not dare to marry her. It was not that he was worried, but after marriage, the responsibilities and mentality would change. Moreover, they were still young. Cultivators pursued the path of immortality, but unlike mortals, they did not give birth to children and end their lives. "Humph, just you wait." Jiang Shui snorted. After that, she grabbed Zhou Xuanji's face and pulled it. "Stop fooling around. What if I get stuck by a fishbone?" A nascent soul realm cultivator was killed by a fishbone? Nonsense. The world is so big that nothing is too strange. You only know how to quibble. The two of them fooled around for a while, and only after Zhou Xuanji finished eating did Jiang Shui leave. She was prepared to roast some other wild game. Zhou Xuanji raised his right hand and created the Tianxia map again. He continued to study it. Every day, he would spend time studying the Tianxia map. The Tianxia map should not only be a support-type treasure. He hoped to discover its attacking methods. Spring passed and autumn came. 4 months passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 7. At this rate, he would definitely be able to break through to the Astral Projection Realm before Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended. Han Shenbua and Xiao Jinghong had also begun pushing for a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm, and the others had also made some progress in their cultivation. Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin and Beishao Wangjian were getting closer and closer to the Spirit Spring stage. With the three-eyed drought rodent around, they could always find all kinds of natural treasures. Coupled with the resources they obtained from the enemies, their cultivation speed was naturally fast. On this day, Zhou Xuanji began to break through to the 5th level of the Sword Qi Golden Body Incantation. Flesh Sword. Daoya Old Man took out a giant cauldron and placed many spirit herbs into it. At the same time, he set up a formation around the cauldron to gather spiritual qi from the heavens and the earth. The others stopped their cultivation and came over to watch. So many herbs. Can our master handle it? Beishao Wangjian asked worriedly. Just by looking at the natural treasures in the cauldron, his scalp felt numb. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and asked, "I can't." He immediately gave in and cried out, "You can definitely do it." The others burst out in laughter. They were not worried about Zhou Xuanji. His endurance was unparalleled. Despite the severe injuries he suffered previously, he still managed to pull through. Moreover, he had the Tianxia map in his hand. Soon, the cauldron boiled. Zhou Xuanji leaped into it and turned into a golden man instantly. Daoya Old Man stroked his long beard and muttered, "This time, he should be able to form a flesh sword. So many treasures are great nourishment. Even the princes of the empire cannot afford to enjoy them." Jiang Shui looked at Zhou Xuanji worriedly but did not speak. Great Zhou, the main hall of the royal palace. Zhou Yalong knelt on the ground with an ugly expression. "Do you know your mistake?" A majestic voice came from the front. A middle-aged man wearing a black dragon robe sat on the throne. He was handsome and had an indifferent look in his eyes. It was Emperor Yan of Zhou. The Emperor of Great Zhou. He was also the most powerful cultivator in Great Zhou. Facing his question, Zhou Yalong gritted his teeth and said, "I know my mistake." This time, he went to Juadi Cliff without telling Emperor Yan of Zhou. In the end, he returned empty-handed, and 4 of his companions died. It must be known that those people were the successors of the empires or sanctums. He could not deny that he had something to do with their deaths. We will ascend soon. By then, you will be the emperor of Great Zhou. If Great Zhou dies in your hands, how will you face your ancestors? With Great Zhou's fate, you might not even have a good reincarnation. Everything must be done through your brain. Do you understand? Emperor Yan of Zhou tapped his finger on the armrest and said with a stern tone. Zhou Yalong took a deep breath and said, I will remember father's teachings. Great Shang severed ties with Haoqi alliance, and the little evil lord lost his manhood. We personally went to the Hanin divine sect, and they have agreed to marry Su Xianxian to you. She will be the empress of Great Zhou, and the day of your marriage will be the day of our ascension. Emperor Yan of Zhou continued to speak, and Zhou Yalong raised his head. He wanted to retort, but the words were stuck in his throat. He understood what Emperor Yan of Zhou meant. Great Zhou needed a backer. In Great Zhou, only the Sword Monarch and Shitan Changsha are powerful enough, but they are not enough. Su Xianxian is the disciple of the sect lord of the Hanin divine sect. If you treat her well, the Hanin divine sect will not mistreat you. You can have many women, but the position of empress must be of great help to you. Emperor Yan of Zhou stared at Zhou Yalong and said seriously. Zhou Yalong felt bitter in his heart and thought, back then, you married my mother for this purpose? Cultivate well and don't go out during this period of time. The Qilan's tendon will be sent to your residence soon. On the day of your ascension, Great Zhou will undergo a tribulation. As the crown prince, your burden is not light, Emperor Yan of Zhou said earnestly. Zhou Yalong could only nod in agreement. After he left, Shitan Changsha entered the palace. Your Majesty, according to our investigations, Sword God Zhou and Xian Xianghua appeared at Juadi Cliff and fought with the Huangquan twin devils and Chen, Tang, and Xian Wang. Shitan Changsha knelt on the ground and said in a low voice. His eyes were filled with shock. In just a few years, Zhou Xuanji had grown to such a stage. Emperor Yan of Zhou squinted his eyes and said, Do you still remember what we ordered you to do? Chapter 186. This subordinate will always remember. Shitan Changsha cupped his fist and replied respectfully. He had followed Emperor Yan of Zhou for thousands of years and was extremely loyal. Emperor Yan of Zhou sighed and said, We no longer have any attachments in the mortal world. If Great Zhou stabilizes, you should ascend soon. We will wait for you in the upper realm. Shitan Changsha looked up at him with a complicated expression. The ruler and the minister looked at each other, everything was understood without words. The winter snow danced in the air, covering the forest with a layer of silver. It was sad, beautiful, and full of vicissitudes. By the lake, Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin, Xiao Jinghong, and the rest stood in a row, gazing at the vast snowy landscape. They could not help but sigh. Another year of snow. Unknowingly, Xuanji is almost 21. We passed another year in peace. Ha ha ha, there might be some rare treasures on such a snowy day. Emperor Yan of Zhou still has 2 years to ascend. Do you think Master will go? Everyone was talking and laughing, and behind them, Zhou Xuanji was still lying in the cauldron. At this moment, the surface of Zhou Xuanji's body was alternating between gold and silver. Hot air emanated from his body, making it so that the snow could not land on him. Daoya old man stood in front of the cauldron, playing with the three-eyed drought rodent in his hand. What kind of cultivation technique is this kid practicing? He has absorbed so many herbs, but he still hasn't broken through. He muttered with a curious look on his face. There were too many mysteries about Zhou Xuanji that he wanted to know. Unfortunately, this brat refused to say anything. Even Jiang Shui didn't know much. It made him feel as if his heart was being scratched by a cat. Half a month had passed since he entered the cauldron, and Zhou Xuanji had yet to come out. That was all. Another 3 days passed. Zhou Xuanji finally had a chance to break through. The mortal body divine sword was to refine the mortal body into a sword. He crossed his arms in a circle, and the Tianxia map in his right palm was faintly discernible. It attracted the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and formed a cyclone above the cauldron. My body is a sword, my heart is a sword, my eyes are a sword, my hair is a sword. Zhou Xuanji mumbled to himself. Sword chi filled every part of his body. In terms of modern biology, if the sword chi turned into cells, he could form a fleshly legendary sword. Once he mastered it, every part of his body would become a sharp sword. Just a little more. Zhou Xuanji gritted his teeth and roared. Boom! Spiritual energy violently surged into his body, causing the cauldron to shake violently. Everyone turned their heads to look, and all of them became excited. Master is going to succeed? Huang Lianxin cried out in surprise. They immediately walked over. Wait! Stay away from him. Daoya old man raised his hand and shouted with a nervous expression. Hearing this, everyone stopped in their tracks. Xiao! Xiao! Swoosh! Strands of sword chi flew out from the cauldron and soared into the sky like fireworks. It was an extremely magnificent sight. Such a powerful sword chi! Zhao Congjian exclaimed with a look of admiration. There was a loud bang. The huge cauldron exploded, and countless amounts of medicinal liquid splattered everywhere. Zhou Xuanji leaped up. His body was radiating with gold and silver radiance, and his sword chi was like a tornado that surrounded his body. Children, watch carefully. Today, I'll show you what it means to be a sword, and a sword is a man. I want to transform into a sword. Zhou Xuanji said with a smile. His eyes shone with a silver light, and he looked like he would disappear at any moment. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly soared into the sky. His body was enveloped by the silver radiance, and he turned into a silver rainbow that spiraled rapidly in the sky. The snow was swept up and turned into gusts of cold wind. Everyone was looking forward to it anxiously and expectantly. After the silver radiance dissipated, Zhou Xuanji disappeared and was replaced by a silver long sword. The blade was snow-white and was engraved with all sorts of patterns. There were dragon scales, flames, demons, eagles, and so on. The two ends of the crossguard were dragon heads, and the end of the hilt was an emperor's crown. The entire sword looked majestic and was clearly a legendary sword. The long sword spiraled in the sky, and everyone was dumbfounded. Did Zhou Xuanji really turn into a sword? Swoosh! The long sword dived down and quickly transformed into Zhou Xuanji's figure, landing in front of them. Sword Chi Golden Body Incantation Level 5, Flesh Legendary Sword. Completed. Zhou Xuanji could sense the immense power in his body and could not help but let out a long cry. His physical strength grew tremendously, and it could no longer be measured by human strength. The Sword Chi Golden Body Incantation was a physical cultivation technique after all. He turned to Chongming Demon Monarch and said with a smile, "Come, exchange fists with me." Chongming Demon Monarch was a 7th rank demon and a bull demon. He had immense strength. Do I use my full strength, or? Chongming Demon Monarch raised his brow and asked. He naturally did not want to be beaten up. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, "Full strength." Having heard that, he became excited immediately. I finally have a chance to teach Zhou Xuanji a lesson. We have agreed. You can only use your physical strength. You cannot use your spirit energy or swords. Chongming Demon Monarch walked to a nearby place and instructed. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others looked at him with hostility, but he pretended not to see them. Zhou Xuanji walked toward him and said with a smile, "I always keep my word. I said to compete in strength, so I will compete in strength." A human and a demon stood facing each other, 10 meters apart. No one stood behind them. Chongming Demon Monarch grew taller, and the muscles all over his body bulged. His bull horns towered into the sky, and the domineering aura of a demon was fully revealed. He patted his chest and said proudly, "My iron fists are invincible in Great Shang." Today, he was going to show Zhou Xuanji how powerful he was. "How is it compared to Great Shang's Fury Buddha?" Zhou Xuanji asked in a mocking tone, which made Chongming Demon Monarch's face fall immediately. "Okay, I'm going to punch." Zhou Xuanji walked forward. Chongming Demon Monarch's eyes turned sharp and charged toward him as well. 10 meters was such a short distance for them. Both of them came up to each other almost in just one step. They punched almost at the same time. The powerful wind blew against everyone's face, and it hurt. With a loud bang, Zhou Xuanji and Chongming Demon Monarch's fists collided. The white dragon golden robe fluttered loudly. Zhou Xuanji's feet sank into the snow, and so did Chongming Demon Monarch. Both of them slid a step back. "Not bad. You have great strength." Chongming Demon Monarch praised, but he felt a little guilty in his heart. "Oh my. How can this guy be so strong?" Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "Take another punch from me." After that, he punched out with his left fist. Chongming Demon Monarch reacted quickly and punched out as well. Bomb! Chongming Demon Monarch was sent flying backward. His massive body slid dozens of meters in the air before he landed. After he landed, he slid backward for another 10 meters, leaving 2 long ravines on the snowy ground. His left arm was trembling, and he looked up at Zhou Xuanji in fear. "How can it be?" Chongming Demon Monarch swallowed his saliva and mumbled to himself. The others were dumbfounded too. In terms of strength, Zhou Xuanji was already on par with a 7th-ranked demon. And he was a bull demon. Zhou Xuanji shook his numb left hand and said with a smile, "You have been training well recently. From tomorrow onwards, increase the intensity of your training." Having heard this, Chongming Demon Monarch became anxious immediately. "I'm already suffering enough. I can't increase it anymore." He was lazy by nature, and his current state of cultivation was much better than before. Zhou Xuanji walked up to Jiang Shui and asked proudly, "Did I transform into Sword Handsome?" Chapter 187. Handsome. "As long as it's you, it's handsome, okay?" Jiang Shui rolled her eyes at Zhou Xuanji and said half-heartedly. Zhao Congjian, Xiao Jinghong, and Bei Xiao Wangjian surrounded him and asked what sword technique it was. Zhou Xuanji's answer was an energy technique, which disappointed them immediately. All of them had their own cultivation techniques. If they were to recultivate their cultivation techniques, it would take too much time, and they could not afford to waste it. "That's right, Master, Emperor Yan of Zhou will ascend in 2 years. On that day, Zhou Yalong will marry Great Shang's Su Xianxian." Zhao Congjian suddenly remembered something and said to Zhou Xuanji. Not far away, the little black snake heard it and leaped over with a whoosh. "Ha ha ha, I really crippled little evil prince?" He was extremely excited. Xian Xianghua was supposed to be married to the little evil lord, but in the end, the marriage was changed. He instantly understood the reason and was filled with a sense of achievement. Zhou Xuanji rubbed his chin and said, "Emperor Yan of Zhou wants to find a backer for Zhou Yalong." The Hanin divine sect was a first-rate faction, and was not inferior to the Xinhao sect or the Haoqi alliance. However, weren't they allied with the Great Shang dynasty? Were they not giving the Great Shang dynasty face by doing this? Xiao Jinghong asked, 2 years is enough for Master to break through to the leaving aperture realm. Will you go then? Once Zhou Yalong ascended to the throne, he would definitely think of ways to take revenge on Zhou Xuanji. If they were to successfully get married and climb up the Hanin divine sect, it would be even more troublesome. Of course I'm going. I want Emperor Yan of Zhou to see me kill Zhou Yalong. Zhou Xuanji said calmly. He did not hold a grudge against Zhou Yalong, but he had to take revenge for Huang Lianxin. This was a promise. Moreover, without Huang Lianxin, there was no way Zhou Yalong would let him off. There were many things in this world that couldn't be explained with logic. A life for a life, an eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. Then we have to hurry up and cultivate. We can't be a burden to master. Northern Sword Valiant muttered with a serious expression. The little black snake said disdainfully, the one who's dragging us down the most is you. Our mistress's cultivation is about to surpass yours. Northern Sword Valiant blushed and glared at it. Zhou Xuanji ignored their bickering and left with Jiang Shui. He was in a good mood and decided to rest for a day. He would take Jiang Shui to enjoy the snowy scenery and spend some time alone. Daoya old man stood on the spot, thinking hard. Transforming one's body into a divine sword. Is there such a sword cultivation technique in this world? He really couldn't figure it out. He had only heard of this kind of cultivation method in legends. Legend had it that the ancient sword emperors could transform into divine swords and annihilate millions of enemies. Could Zhou Xuanji really be the reincarnation of an ancient sword emperor? It's over. Zhao Xian, this old man is ashamed to have let your child be possessed. As such, in the next few days, Daoya old man looked at Zhou Xuanji with a strange gaze. Until one day, Zhou Xuanji could not take it anymore and found him. After knowing what he was thinking, Zhou Xuanji felt quite speechless. How many times have you suspected that I've been possessed? He was too lazy to explain. Seeing his attitude, Daoya old man felt relieved. Judging from his bad temper, it was obvious that he had not been possessed. He was just like his mother. Inside a pavilion, Su Xianxian sat in front of the dressing table as a maid combed her hair. She looked at herself in the bronze mirror, her eyes a little blurred. "Miss, what are you thinking about?" the maid asked. As she spoke, she looked at Su Xianxian in the mirror and sighed in her heart. She's so beautiful. Great Shang's #1 beauty indeed. Su Xianxian sighed faintly and said, I feel lost. Even though I cultivate hard, I'm still a chess piece of the divine sect that can be used as a bargaining chip at any time. My face has really harmed me. The maid opened her eyes wide and said, How could it harm you? You are going to be the Empress of Great Zhou, the mother of the dynasty. Many women are envious of you. Great Zhou was an empire. As the Empress, she would be surrounded by fate and have a long lifespan. She might even ascend in the future. As a mortal, she did not even dare to have such a dream. Su Xianxian smiled and did not speak. She did not care about the Empress of Great Zhou. Somehow, the ugly face of the Phoenix Sword Emperor suddenly appeared in her mind. No, he should be called Sword God Zhou. Thinking back to the legend of Sword God Zhou, she envied him. She wanted to be like Sword God Zhou, to settle grudges with one slash. No one could restrain him. He even dared to kill the Empress of Great Zhou. Even Xinhao sect and Haoqi alliance dared to resist. That was true freedom. Sigh. She let out a heavy sigh and subconsciously reached out to touch her face. If she did not have this face, could she exchange it for freedom? In the blink of an eye, Zhou Xuanji was about to celebrate his 21st birthday. This morning, he opened his eyes and prepared to get out of bed. Jiang Shui hugged him like an octopus, and he could not free himself. Stupid girl, how old are you already? Why are you still hugging me like this? Zhou Xuanji stared at her. He remembered that when he was young, he was hugged by this girl to the point that he could not breathe. He felt a little anxious. Childhood trauma. Hearing his voice, Jiang Shui rubbed her eyes and got up slowly. She hugged him and said weakly, It's so early in the morning, what are you doing? She had just woken up from a dream. She was still in a daze, and she did not look like a cultivator at all. Zhou Xuanji said, Nothing. I want to go out for a walk. You continue to sleep. Forget it. I will get up and prepare for you to wash up. Jiang Shui mumbled before she got down from the bed and put on her outer clothes. Zhou Xuanji got up and put on the white dragon golden robe. After a while, the two of them went out. As soon as they walked out of the wooden hut, they saw Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Chongming demon monarch, and the others huddled together, discussing something. What is this? Kiran? Impossible, how could there be such a small qilin? It must be a divine beast. There's no demonic aura on it. It's so cute, don't scare it. Kiran? Zhou Xuanji and Jiang Shui heard him and were immediately interested. They held hands and walked over. Soon, Zhou Xuanji saw the qilin. It was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was crimson. It was small and cute. It had the head of a lion, the antlers of a deer, the eyes of a tiger, the body of a moose, the scales of a dragon, and the tail of an ox. Even though it was small, it still looked mighty. As soon as the qilin saw Zhou Xuanji, it leapt up and jumped into his arms, causing everyone to cry out in surprise. Does this little guy know master? Xiao Jinghong asked curiously. The others also had the same guess. Zhou Xuanji touched the red qilin and looked curious. He could sense the intimacy the little guy had toward him. At this moment, Daoya old man walked over. When he saw the red qilin, his eyes widened. He rushed over and snatched the red qilin away. Let me inspect it. You guys disperse first. Don't disturb me. Daoya old man turned around and left with the red qilin. The red qilin cried out with a tender voice like a chick. The group looked at each other but did not say anything. Qilins are auspicious beasts. It seems like we are going to be lucky today, Zhou Xuanji said expectantly. Zhou Xuanji said expectantly. He would be 21 years old today. He hoped to get a mighty legendary sword. Ordinary or iron, bronze, silver, gold, amethyst, glorious gold, heavenly soul, intimidating spirit, it should be a legendary sword that surpassed glorious gold, right? After that, the group dispersed. Time passed quickly. A few hours passed. Zhou Xuanji came to the lakeside and was about to sit down when the sword spirit's voice resounded in his mind. Analyze that the sword owner has reached 21 years old. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained, heavenly soul. Chapter 188. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained, heavenly soul, sky extinguishing sword, gold, truth sword. Heavenly soul. Heavenly soul. Heavenly soul. Important things must be shouted 3 times in one's heart. Zhou Xuanji trembled in excitement. The glorious gold legendary sword was already very powerful. How powerful would the heavenly soul legendary sword be? When he broke through to astral projection, he was confident that he could defeat everyone at spirit refinement and great realization with the amethyst and glorious gold legendary swords. If he had the heavenly soul legendary sword, how powerful would he be? Supercilious. Only this word could describe the swelling in his heart. Next, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Sky Extinguishing Sword grade, Heavenly Soul description, a legendary sword born at the beginning of the world. It contains the power to destroy the world. Only astral projection cultivators can use it. Sword name, Truth Sword grade, Gold description, those who are pierced by this sword must speak the truth. Only astral projection cultivators can use it. Zhou Xuanji raised his brow. Can this be a problem for me? As for the truth sword, although it had some special abilities, it was no longer a threat to him. Where's the sky extinguishing sword? Let me see it. Zhou Xuanji asked in his heart. He could not wait to see how amazing the heavenly soul legendary sword was. The sword owner must reach astral projection to see and use it. The sword spirit replied, but it did not extinguish the fire in his heart. In a good mood, he walked toward Jiang Shui. Jiang Shui was meditating, and he tickled her, which made her glare at him. He smiled proudly before turning to harass the others. A while later, Daoya old man stopped Zhou Xuanji, who was wandering around. Something bad has happened, he said seriously. Zhou Xuanji sat down in front of him and asked, "What is it?" The red Qilin jumped into his arms and rubbed against him intimately. "When you were born, a Qilin appeared. Do you remember?" Daoya old man asked with a frown. A murderous intent could be seen in his eyes. Zhou Xuanji stroked the red Qilin in his hand and asked, "Could this little guy be the son of that Qilin?" "That's right, Emperor Yan of Zhou killed that Qilin and extracted its Qilin tendon. Before that Qilin died, it sent this little fellow near us. It has already turned into dust and disappeared." Daoya old man's reply made Zhou Xuanji frown. Emperor Yan of Zhou's actions were too cruel. If this matter were to spread out, what would the world say? When you were born, that Qilin came to pray for you, and your fate is actually connected. Over these years, your luck has been so good, and you have escaped death many times. In actuality, the Qilin's prayer also helped you. The Qilin's death is equivalent to cutting off a portion of your fate. Emperor Yan of Zhou was most likely worried that you would suppress Zhou Yalong, so he bought time for him to grow. Daoya old man guessed, which made Zhou Xuanji frown even deeper. How vicious. Coincidentally, I am also preparing to barge into the great Zhou dynasty. Zhou Xuanji took a deep breath and said, "I will remember this enmity." With that, he grabbed the red Kirin and left. "Hey, don't go, let me play with it for a while." Daoya old man stretched out his hand and cried out, but Zhou Xuanji ignored him. And so, the red Qilin joined Zhou Xuanji's party. Qilins were auspicious beasts that represented good luck. At the same time, they were also very powerful. Legend said that a long time ago, before the human race was born, the Qilin race dominated the world. The red Qilin was about the same size as the three-eyed drought rodent. The two soon played together and rolled around on the snowy ground. Next, Zhou Xuanji continued to cultivate hard. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 8. Now, he was so powerful that even Daoya old man was amazed. With the legendary sword made of flesh, his strength was terrifying, and the Tianxia map could provide him with endless spirit energy. Daoya old man often sighed in amazement. In less than 100 years, this brat would be able to enter the northern wilderness top 100. By then, he would be able to face Lin Guanyu and Huang Hantian head-on. Zhou Xuanji was also looking forward to meeting those two. He wanted to avenge his humiliation. Beishao Wangjian also broke through to Soul Fountain. Jiang Shui was 10 days later than him, while Huang Lianxin was still working on her breakthrough. Xiao Jinghong and Han Shenbo were already at Astral Infant Level 10, while Zhao Zongjian was at Level 5. The others had their own improvements, but none of them had broken through to the next stage. All of you are extraordinary, but compared to Zhou Xuanji, you are all mediocre. Daoya old man sat on a huge rock by the lake and said with a chuckle. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and Zhao Zongjian were all talented enough to join the sanctum. Han Shenbo was even a disciple of the sanctum. Although Huang Lianxin's talent in cultivation was not top-notch, she had the Ghost Emperor Divine Eye, which was really powerful. When she reached great accomplishment in her cultivation, she would surely be someone who would shake the world. Big and small air were dragon eagles, mounts that countless people desired. The three-eyed drought rodent recognized all the treasures in the world. Chongming Demon Monarch was a 7th-ranked demon. Among the demons, there were not many who could cultivate to such a stage. Only Beishao Wangjian and the little black snake had mediocre talents. So, the two of them disliked each other and did not want to bear the title of the weakest. During their cultivation, some people passed by occasionally, but they did not cause any conflict. Zhou Xuanji and the rest were scattered when they cultivated. The two dragon eagles flew around, so their identities were not exposed. But the good times did not last long. 3 months later, a group of carriages barged into the place where Zhou Xuanji and the rest were cultivating. The leader was a muscular man who wore heavy black armor. His skin was dark and he did not wear a helmet. His black hair was loose, and he rode on a giant tiger that was also black. The tiger's eyes were filled with a murderous aura. Behind him were 15 soldiers riding on demonic beasts, escorting 4 carriages. May I ask who is Sword God Zhou? The man in black armor asked. With this, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Han Shenbua, and Chongming Demon Monarch looked at them warily. Sensing their gazes, the man in black armor frowned slightly and said, "We are the emissaries of the Shanghai Ziggurat, Lu Longlin. We represent the Shanghai Ziggurat to visit Sword God Zhou. Behind this is a generous gift. I hope Sword God Zhou will not blame us." Shanghai Ziggurat. One of the northern wilderness region's 8 sanctums. It was also the largest intelligence-gathering faction. The Northern Wilderness Top 100 was created by them. Great Zhou's hero ranking was based on them, but it was not rigorous enough. I wonder why Emissary General Lu is looking for our sword god? Daoya old man asked with a relaxed expression. The Shanghai Ziggurat rarely fought with the secular world. They were probably here to gather information. It's like this, recently, our Shanghai Ziggurat wants to create a Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Everyone says that Sword God Zhou is an old monster, but according to our observations, Sword God Zhou's body has been growing, so we want to test his bone age. If he meets the requirements, he will enter the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Lu Longlin replied as he looked at everyone and quickly locked onto Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji was still cultivating by the lake. The vortex of spiritual qi above his head was visible to the naked eye, which made his expression change slightly. This is a good thing. Xuanji, come here quickly. Daoya old man waved at Zhou Xuanji. Having heard him, Zhou Xuanji got up and came to his side with the 8-step sword lunge. Such exquisite footwork. Lu Longlin felt quite startled. He had not been able to see Zhou Xuanji's movements clearly. Chapter 189. What's so good about entering the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking? Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown. His goal was the Northern Wilderness Top 100. Wasn't this lowering his status? Daoya old man rolled his eyes at him and said, "What do you know? This is called fame. The more famous you are, the more benefits you will receive. If you are the top genius in the world, apart from evil cultivators, who would dare to kill you?" Zhou Xuanji heard him and felt that it made sense. He looked at Lu Longlin and said, "I'm 21 years old this year and am at Astral Infant level 8. My strength is enough to defeat anyone in the spirit refinement stage. Can I be ranked first?" Lu Longlin was stunned. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, and the others were speechless. Can you not be so direct? The Shanghai Ziggurat soldiers all looked at Zhou Xuanji strangely. They all suspected that this guy was boasting. They did not doubt Sword God Zhou's strength, but who would believe that he was only 21 years old? Can I have a look? Lu Longlin asked respectfully. Being able to defeat anyone in the spirit refinement stage was enough to make him feel respect. Zhou Xuanji nodded and stepped forward. Lu Longlin got off his horse and came up to him. He placed his right hand on Zhou Xuanji's shoulder and closed his eyes. The method of determining bone age in the cultivation world was different from that of modern society on Earth. One used divine sense to probe into the depths of the bones to determine how old a person was. A while later, Lu Longlin opened his eyes and swallowed his saliva. "You're really only 21 years old, a 21-year-old astral infant cultivator." Although it was not unprecedented, this boy had already reached level 8. This level of cultivation was far too shocking. "You don't believe in yourself?" Zhou Xuanji asked calmly. "Must you force me to act cool?" Lu Longlin took a deep breath and said, "Let's fight and let me test your strength." "How about that? With your talent and cultivation, you can already be ranked first. The strength test is just for me to evaluate you more clearly." He looked at Zhou Xuanji with sincerity in his eyes. In response, Zhou Xuanji could only sigh. There was no helping it. You wanted me to fight. Okay. Let's fight in the sky. Zhou Xuanji nodded. After that, he leaped up and flew into the sky. Lu Longlin followed closely behind. About 20 breaths later, the two landed. Zhou Xuanji held the God Emperor sword and white dragon bone sword in his hands. He was unscathed and looked calm. Lu Longlin, covered in blood, looked at him in horror. The soldiers of the Shanghai Ziggurat all had their mouths wide open, as if they had seen a ghost. What did they just see? Lu Longlin, who was at the spirit refinement realm, was completely suppressed and had no way to fight back. Brother Zhou is amazing. I'm not as good as you. With your strength, you are indeed invincible in the spirit refinement realm. You haven't used your full strength, have you? Lu Longlin said with a look of admiration on his face. Zhou Xuanji could not deny it. After that, Lu Longlin began to recuperate. The others came over and asked Zhou Xuanji how much of his strength he had used. After all, he had only used 2 divine swords. Zhou Xuanji did not reply but smiled. Daoya old man sighed, it seems that even I am not your opponent now. How many years had he been with Zhou Xuanji? This child's growth rate was truly terrifying. However, he was most curious about the sword in Zhou Xuanji's hand. For cultivators, wealth, companions, techniques, and land were all part of one's strength. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick. Lu Longlin got up and took out a jade slip. He walked over to Zhou Xuanji and asked, "Do you have anything to introduce yourself?" "I can write it down." Zhou Xuanji said, "My real name is Zhou Xuanji, and my mother is Lady Zhao Xian of Great Zhou." Today, it was time for him to correct Lady Zhao Xian's name. He did not know if Lady Zhao Xian's paternal family had really rebelled, but he was Lady Zhao Xian's son. From today onwards, he would travel under the name of Zhou Xuanji. Lu Longlin felt quite startled and a strange look appeared on his face. No wonder this boy wanted to kill the Empress of Great Zhou. Back then, news of the Empress of Great Zhou chasing after Lady Zhao Xian had long since spread, but Emperor Yan of Zhou had turned a blind eye. It was just like when the Empress of Great Zhou had been killed. He had only issued a warrant and had not personally acted. This was the Emperor. It looked like it was just the enmity between the two goddesses, but in actuality, Emperor Yan of Zhou had already cleaned up the Emperor's side for the next emperor. First on the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking, Zhou Xuanji, known as Sword God Zhou. His talent is unparalleled, Lu Longlin said with a slight smile. Even though he had not received any information on the other emissaries, he believed that Zhou Xuanji was definitely first. His talent was unparalleled, and it was far more powerful than the second-ranked. Following this, he exchanged some pleasantries with Zhou Xuanji before leaving. "Go and check what's in the carriages." Zhou Xuanji got up and said as he patted his bottom. Everyone went to the 4 carriages. Daoya old man stood beside Zhou Xuanji and stroked his long beard as he sighed and said, "With a son like you, Lady Zhao Xian can rest at ease in the netherworld." Zhou Xuanji nodded. "In a few years, I should also find a way to ascend. Otherwise, when my time is up, I'll have to go down to accompany your mother," Daoya old man said as he shook his head and smiled. Unlike Chief Monk Xuanhe, his cultivation had not been able to break through to the great realization stage. If this went on, his lifespan would run out and he would die. Before, he had been prepared to die, but after seeing Zhou Xuanji, he did not want to die. He suddenly felt great anticipation. He wanted to see Zhou Xuanji's majestic bearing. "Don't worry, I won't let you die," Zhou Xuanji said as he patted his shoulder and smiled. Zhou Xuanji patted his shoulder and smiled. Although he was always arguing with Daoya old man, he had long regarded this old man as his family. The two of them looked at each other and smiled before walking towards the carriages. The 4 carriages were filled with all sorts of treasures, jewelry, and even some spell scrolls and enchanted artifacts. All in all, they were quite sincere. Shanghai Ziggurat could become the most powerful intelligence organization because they were generous in their spending. With these treasures, their cultivation speed would increase again. After this, the group returned to their boring life of cultivation. More than a month later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 9. Han Shenhua exclaimed in amazement. At this rate, Zhou Xuanji would break through to astral projection before him. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji celebrated his 22nd birthday. He forcefully broke through to Astral Infant Level 10 and began to break through to astral projection. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached 22 years old. Gotcha started. Ding! Congratulations, the sword owner obtained Glorious Gold, Holy Light Redemption Sword, Silver, Snakeskin Sword, 10,000 Ultimate Steps. Glorious Gold Legendary Sword. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and felt elated. My luck has been pretty good recently. Could it be because of the red Qilin? An auspicious beast is a bull. Next, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Holy Light Redemption Sword grade, Glorious Gold description. This sword has the ability to absorb the enemy's life force. It can also revive the dead and regenerate broken bones. Sword name, Snakeskin Sword grade, Silver description, forged from the skin of countless strange snakes. If it flies, its flight path will be unpredictable, making it difficult to track and attack. Revive the dead and regenerate broken bones. Zhou Xuanji's eyes brightened. This sword is great. Amazing. But the snakeskin sword's special function was snakeskin movement. Chapter 190. Zhou Xuanji took out the 2 legendary swords and examined them closely. The Holy Light Redemption Sword was a golden sword with a wide blade. The connection between the hilt and the blade was like a pair of wings, which made him wonder if it was really the redemption sword. It seemed to be very lethal. As for the snakeskin sword, the surface of the blade was covered in snakeskin patterns. The hilt was slightly slanted, like a small half of a black snake's body. He immediately stepped on the snakeskin sword and began to fly with the Holy Light Redemption Sword in his hand. The others noticed his movements. Those 2 swords seemed to be new. Han Shenhua asked curiously. The Holy Light Redemption Sword was obviously not an ordinary sword. Xiao Jinghong nodded and smiled. Today, Master will be 22 years old. Every time it was Zhou Xuanji's birthday, he would have a few more swords. Everyone had long since understood the pattern. Zhou Xuanji flew quickly in the air. Sometimes, he spiraled, and sometimes, he landed at a slanted angle. His flight path was ever-changing, and the onlookers were dazzled. Could it be that he is practicing some kind of sword technique? The little black snake blinked its eyes and asked in confusion. No one answered it, because no one else knew. After a while, Zhou Xuanji landed and put away the Holy Light Redemption Sword and Snakeskin Sword. What is 10,000 ultimate steps? He asked in his heart, could it be a kind of footwork? Then, an unfamiliar memory drilled into his mind. As it turned out, the 10,000 everlasting steps was a type of movement sword technique. It was similar to the 8-step sword lunge, but it was not a pure movement technique. Instead, it was an offensive sword technique. Within 1,000 feet, he could kill the enemy with a single step. It was even faster than the ranged sword propelling. Most importantly, it was very difficult for the enemy to dodge. The ranged sword propelling was actually very easy to dodge, so Zhou Xuanji rarely used it. He immediately took out the dog-culling sword and began to practice the 10,000 ultimate steps. He was practicing his swordsmanship by the lake. Seeing him practicing, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Beixiao Wangjian and Huang Lianxin immediately surrounded him. Another new sword technique. I wonder what kind of powerful sword technique it is. Zhao Congjian mumbled to himself, his eyes burning. Xiao Jinghong stretched out his hand and covered his eyes. It's better if you don't look. No. I want to see it. Zhao Zongjian slapped his hand away and said excitedly. The 10,000 everlasting steps had a total of 180 sword moves, and it could cover a distance of 300 meters. If one's cultivation level was high enough, it wouldn't even be a dream for them to cross 1,000 miles and slay their enemies. With Zhou Xuanji's current strength, practicing the first round of 10,000 ultimate steps took him 15 breaths of time. His movements were smooth, as if he had practiced for a long time. As always. After practicing it 100 times, he had achieved minor success in 10,000 everlasting steps. After 200 repetitions, 10,000 everlasting steps reached the major stage. After 300 repetitions, the 10,000 everlasting steps had formed its sword intent. The sword will of 10,000 ultimate steps was incredibly sharp. Once he entered the sword will mode, Zhou Xuanji's expression became cold. He raised his sword and slashed at a tree 100 meters away. In that instant, Xiao Jinghong and the other three could only sense that Zhou Xuanji had turned into a series of afterimages, and he was so fast that he could not be seen with the naked eye. There was a loud bang. The tree's trunk shattered, and countless branches and leaves scattered. Zhou Xuanji appeared behind the tree. He held the dog-culling sword in his hand, and his robes fluttered in the wind. From behind, he looked so handsome and domineering. Xiao Jinghong and the other three immediately surrounded him and asked him questions. 10,000 everlasting steps. At small accomplishment, you can kill from 100 meters away. At great accomplishment, you can kill from 1,000 miles away. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. His tone was very cool, which made the four even more excited. You guys should first master the sword techniques that you have. Zhou Xuanji snorted. After that, he turned around and left. Xiao Jinghong and the other three were not discouraged. Instead, they were even more motivated. 3 months later, Han Shenbo returned from his scouting trip. He held a blue-covered book in his hand. His expression was one of excitement as he gathered everyone together. What made you lose your composure like this? Chongming Demon Monarch cried out. Recently, under Daoya Old Man's guidance, his cultivation had improved. He felt that he had a chance to break through to the 8th rank, so he was in a good mood. Han Shenbo coughed lightly and opened the blue-covered book. The first batch of the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking has been released. It has spread to all major factions and empires, he said. The top genius of the Northern Wilderness, Zhou Xuanji, the son of Great Zhou's Lady Zhao Xian. He is known as Sword God Zhou. He reached Astral Infant Level 8 at the age of 21, and he can defeat anyone in the Spirit Refinement stage. The Shanghai Ziggurat nominated him as the unparalleled way of the sword in the Northern Wilderness. His spirit is not inferior to the ancient Sword Emperor. Everyone heard him and became excited. The unparalleled way of the sword in the Northern Wilderness. His spirit is not inferior to the ancient Sword Emperor. Well said. Xiao Jinghong clapped his hands and praised. This time, the Shanghai Ziggurat nominated him personally. This sentence would surely spread across the world. Zhou Xuanji looked calm, but he was proud in his heart. Not bad. Han Shenbo continued to read. The first page of the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking recorded Zhou Xuanji's achievements since his birth. He fought the sword monarch of Great Zhou and killed the empress of Great Zhou. Great Shang's prowess shook the world with the sun, moon, and stars. Xian Xianghua, Huang Hantian, Xinhao Sect, Haoqi Alliance, and many other famous people were mentioned. Just when everyone was excited, the world was shocked. Sword God Zhou was only 21 years old. A 21-year-old astral infant level 8. Was there any justice in this world? In an instant, the entire Northern Wilderness region was shaken. Even the sanctums were discussing Zhou Xuanji. This time, Zhou Xuanji's name was remembered by countless people. After the news spread to Great Zhou, it caused a huge commotion. What? Sword God Zhou is the prince of Great Zhou. Ha ha ha, our Great Zhou is blessed with great people indeed. No wonder the Empress of Great Zhou would assassinate Sword God Zhou for no reason. So that's why. Her son should be like Sword God Zhou. I suggest Zhou Xuanji to be the crown prince of Great Zhou. Zhou Yalong could not even enter the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Although it was because of his age, what was his cultivation when he was 20 years old? Zhou Xuanji could kill him with one finger. Within Great Zhou's territory, all kingdoms and cities had such discussions. The one who was most affected was Zhou Yalong. The Empress of Great Zhou was so vicious, how good could her son be? Although Zhou Yalong had a good reputation, he was not as benevolent as Zhou Xuanji. On the other side, in the Great Zhou royal palace, Emperor Yan of Zhou sat on his throne and listened to the soldiers reading in the palace. Songhai Ziggurat called him unparalleled sword's way in the northern wilderness, not inferior to the ancient sword emperor. The soldier read carefully. After he finished, he looked up at Emperor Yan of Zhou carefully. The civil and military officials in the 2 rows were all shocked. Zhou Yalong's face was ugly. His eyes were burning with hatred. Zhou Qingxin's expression was complicated, while the princes were tongue-tied. Sword God Zhou was their brother. Okay, you can leave first. Shitan Changsha stood up and waved his hand. The soldier felt relieved and left the palace immediately. Emperor Yan of Zhou laughed suddenly. Well said. It is Great Zhou's honor for my son to become the top genius in the northern wilderness. Zhou Yalong heard this and his eyes almost spewed fire. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his flesh and bled, but he did not let go. The hatred of killing his mother was irreconcilable. When Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, he would use all the power of the entire empire to kill Zhou Xuanji. Humph, I'm afraid he's an unfilial son. At this moment, an unpleasant voice came from outside the palace. Lin Guanyu walked in with an indifferent expression, ignoring the shock of all the civil and military officials. Chapter 191. Facing Lin Guanyu's rude words, Emperor Yan of Zhou was expressionless. He had never been on good terms with this brother-in-law of his. It was because of Lin Guanyu and the merciful Melody Cliff that the Empress of the Great Zhou was so arrogant and domineering that she disturbed his harem. I wonder what brings Brother Lin to the Great Zhou dynasty? Emperor Yan of Zhou asked indifferently. This fellow had barged into the Great Zhou imperial palace. He did not take him seriously at all. If not for the fact that he was about to ascend, he would have abolished Lin Guanyu. On the day of ascension, Zhou Xuanji will surely come. At that time, I will kill him in Great Zhou. Lin Guanyu said indifferently, completely unafraid of offending Emperor Yan of Zhou. As soon as these words came out, the civil and military officials were in an uproar. Zhou Xuanji was coming? Shitan Changsha frowned and asked, why is he here? Lin Guanyu pointed at Zhou Yalong and said, Zhou Xuanji had a maidservant by his side. That maidservant's clansmen were all slaughtered by the Yalong. Out of the hundreds of thousands of people in the city, only that one was left alive. Hearing this, everyone's expressions fell, including Emperor Yan of Zhou's. Zhou Yalong widened his eyes and quickly explained, I killed the Ghost Emperor tribe. They are the descendants of Xinhao's Pontiff Ming. Other than that, I have never massacred a city. Even so, everyone still looked at him strangely. Massacring the entire city was truly insane. If such a person became the son of heaven in the future, what kind of atrocious things would he do? But right now, other than Zhou Yalong, no one else could assume the position of the son of heaven. Then you can stay in the Zhou dynasty for now. He did not look at Zhou Yalong and instead stared at Lin Guanyu. Lin Guanyu nodded slightly and also looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou with killing intent in his eyes. By the lake. Spit fire. Zhou Xuanji folded his arms in front of his chest and instructed. As soon as he finished speaking, the red qilin on his shoulder stretched its head forward and burped. A wisp of charred smoke seeped out from its mouth. Zhou Xuanji looked at him in disdain and asked, why are you so weak? The red Qilin felt aggrieved and buried its head under its claws. Daoya old man shouted from afar, "It was just born not long ago. Don't force it." "Did anyone force you when you were young?" Zhou Xuanji glanced at him and said, "I killed an evil cultivator at Inner Pellet when I was 2 years old. What do you think?" Daoya old man was stunned, not knowing what to say. "You're ruthless." Zhou Xuanji continued to train the red Qilin. He only stopped after training it for an hour. The little fellow ran towards the three-eyed drought rodent with a wronged expression. He shook his head with a smile and looked at the horizon. His thoughts had already drifted to the great Zhou. After thinking for a while, he continued to cultivate. In the blink of an eye. A month later, Zhou Xuanji began breaking through to astral projection. Everyone gathered around and waited expectantly. Once Master achieves a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm, it'll be the time for you to stand at the top of the world. Xiao Jinghong said with a face full of admiration. If he encountered Xinhao sect and Haoqi alliance in the future, he would not have to worry. The others nodded in agreement. Daoya old man stroked his beard and smiled. When he breaks through to the God Ascension level, he might be able to enter the top 50 of the Northern Wilderness top 100. Once he breaks through to the Mahayana level, he will be able to compete for the top spot in the world. As he said this, he sighed in his heart. Even though they saw this freak every day, when they thought about his talent and strength, they couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Zhou Xuanji sat by the lake as spiritual qi surged into his body. At this moment, he was using his inner vision. The leaving Aperture Realm was the realm where one's primordial spirit could leave one's body after clearing all 9 apertures in one's body. If the primordial spirit could leave the body, it would be able to absorb spiritual qi and grow stronger. Now, he had already opened up the apertures in his arms. The 9 apertures in the human body were located in the limbs, head, abdomen, chest, and back. There were 2 apertures on the back, but they were not as difficult to open up as the aperture in the heart. Zhou Xuanji had already mastered the flesh sword, so it was not difficult for him to open up all 9 apertures. He opened up an aperture every half an hour, which made Daoya old man's face twitch. "I'm not watching anymore. This is too depressing." Daoya old man turned around and left, waving his hand. The others watched with great interest to prepare for breaking through to astral projection in the future. "I feel like astral projection is not that difficult," Jiang Shui mumbled. The others had the same thought. Chongming Demon Monarch covered his forehead and said, "That's just him. I've seen many cultivators die from blood spurting out from their bodies when they broke through to astral projection." Astral projection was a major obstacle on the path of cultivation. Regardless of whether it was humans or demons, the death rate before this stage was extremely high. Zhou Xuanji had the protection of the Tianxia map and a powerful physique, so his life was not in danger. Time continued to pass. A long while later. Suddenly, Zhou Xuanji opened up the last aperture. Next, his body trembled, and he felt that he was flying. He looked down and realized that his body was still on the ground. Everyone was looking at his body anxiously. "This is the out-of-body experience?" Zhou Xuanji was amazed. He felt that he was as light as a feather and was not affected by gravity. He looked over and actually saw some lonely souls and wild ghosts. Some were at the bottom of the lake, some were floating above the forest, and some were hiding in the bushes in the forest. "Damn, why are there so many ghosts around? Seeing ghosts in broad daylight? Aren't they afraid of light?" Zhou Xuanji cursed. No wonder he always felt chilly winds blowing at his back when he was sleeping. Shortly after, he collected his thoughts and traveled around the world. After his soul left his body, his speed became even faster. After he leaped over mountains and lakes, Zhou Xuanji was in a good mood. The feeling of traveling with his soul was so good that he could not help but sigh in amazement. "I'm a mayfly in the world, a grain in the vast ocean. I mourn for the fleeting moment of my life, and I envy the boundless river. I carry a flying immortal to travel, and I embrace the bright moon to die. On the other side, Jiang Shui saw that Zhou Xuanji was not moving and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with him?" His soul left his body. "Don't worry. He will be fine." Chongming Demon Monarch explained in amazement. "This guy's breakthrough is as easy as drinking water." A while later, Zhou Xuanji's astral spirit entered his body. Next, his spirit energy began to grow tremendously. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached astral projection. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained, silver, bookcutter sword, amethyst, Frost King icebound sword, Rui purple cloud robe. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes with an odd expression. Bookcutter sword again? Wasn't it broken? And how did its grade increase? Some swords are not unique. The sword spirit explained, which made Zhou Xuanji feel that it was forced. But it was not bad to obtain another amethyst legendary sword. Most importantly, he could finally use the Heavenly Soul legendary sword. The information of the two legendary swords appeared before his eyes, but he ignored the bookcutter sword. Sword name, Frost King icebound sword grade, amethyst description, made with 10,000-year-old ice flame. Contains boundless ice elemental energy. It can absorb the ice and snow in the world and freeze an area of 100 miles with one slash. Zhou Xuanji smiled satisfactorily and began regulating his chi flow. The others came up to him and surrounded him, asking him questions all at once. A while later, Zhou Xuanji got up slowly. After breaking through to astral projection, he felt that his spirit energy grew tremendously. His overall power was more than 5 times stronger than before. Chapter 192. Zhou Xuanji took out the Frost King sword first. Seeing that he took out a new legendary sword, everyone was curious. The Frost King's sword was a meter long, and its blade was 4 fingers wide. It looked like it was made of crystal, and the moment he took it out, everyone felt a wave of chilliness wash over them. Such a handsome sword. Beixiao Wangjian praised. His eyes were filled with envy. Zhou Xuanji smiled proudly and slashed toward the surface of the lake. In an instant, the surface of the lake froze at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone was dumbfounded. After that, he put away the Frost King sword. After that, he took out the sky extinguishing sword. With this sword, everyone, including Zhou Xuanji, felt a chill down their spines. The sky extinguishing sword's blade was blackish red in color, as if magma was hidden within the blade. The sword guard was like the head of a demon king from hell, with 2 horns growing out of it. The sword hilt was like a burnt bone. The entire sword looked like a demonic sword. The blade was a meter long, and it was as wide as the Frost King's sword. Holding the sword, Zhou Xuanji squinted his eyes. So powerful. Just by holding it, he felt invincible. It was as though he could destroy the world with a single slash. He immediately put away the sword because the others were already trembling and were covered in cold sweat. What sword is that? Why do I feel fear when I see it? Zhao Congjian asked in confusion. His eyes were filled with worry. Would such a demonic sword cause Zhou Xuanji's cultivation to go berserk? Jiang Shui also looked at Zhou Xuanji anxiously. Seeing this, he smiled and said, "This is the sky extinguishing sword. Only astral projection cultivators can use it. Don't worry, my sword will not harm me." The Supreme Legendary Sword System's products were all top-notch. There was no such thing as losing control. In half a year, Emperor Yan of Zhou would ascend. Zhou Xuanji was looking forward to that day. After that, he gathered everyone together to discuss about charging into Great Zhou. Everyone in the team was powerful. Other than the 3-eyed drought rodent and the red qilin, the weakest was at the peak of inner pellet. In a kingdom, they could be the most powerful cultivators of a kingdom. Zhou Xuanji needed their help. Using a legendary sword consumed too much energy after all. After he finished fighting, he needed his teammates to help him escape. Daoya Old Man was not only powerful, but he could also tell fortunes. Chongming Demon Monarch could defend against an army of 10,000. The 2 Dragon Eagles could be used as fighter jets. Huang Lianxin had the Ghost Emperor Divine Eye and could see through everything, including arrays. Jiang Shui was a sorcerer and healer. Beixiao Wangjian, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, and Han Shenbua could all be fighting forces. For now, he was very satisfied with this team. When they began to discuss the matter of killing Zhou Yalong, the entire world gathered in the Great Zhou dynasty. Emperor Yan of Zhou was in the northern wilderness top 100, and he was about to ascend, so he invited all the powerful figures in the world to come and watch. The Hanin divine sect had already brought many of their elders with them, and the Great Qin Empire had done the same. After Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, although the Great Zhou Empire's power was greatly reduced, he still went to the upper realm. If they destroyed Great Zhou and met Emperor Yan of Zhou after ascending, how awkward would that be? The cultivation resources in the upper realm were definitely higher than those in the mortal realm. No one could predict how powerful Emperor Yan of Zhou would become. In a mansion in the Great Zhou imperial city, Su Xianxian, who was wearing a veil, sat in front of the stone table, her eyes empty. An old woman stood beside her with an angry expression and berated, "Do you know what you're doing? Disfiguring your face and rejecting the marriage? Let me tell you, even if your face is disfigured, you still have to marry Zhou Yalong. However, with your face gone, will Zhou Yalong treat you well in the future? You're hopelessly stupid, you're just forcing yourself onto the path of death." This old woman was an elder of the Hanin divine sect, and she was called Zhang Lanya. She had raised Su Xianxian, and she was so angry that her body trembled. In order to reject the marriage, Su Xianxian had disfigured her face. This caused the higher-ups of the Hanin divine sect to be furious, and they did not even dare to tell Great Zhou about this. Now, they were thinking of ways to help her recover her face. No matter where, a woman's face was very important. This was especially so in the cultivation world. Unless one could shake the world like Xian Xianghua, one could only rely on their face. Su Xianxian remained silent and did not say a word. At this moment, she wished that someone would come and save her. She had completely given up on the Hanin divine sect and felt that it was a den of demons. "That's right, is Zhou Xuanji coming?" Su Xianxian suddenly asked. Now, everyone knew that sword god Zhou's name was Zhou Xuanji. She already knew about Zhou Xuanji's past. He was also a prince of Great Zhou. He had an irreconcilable feud with Zhou Yalong. Along the way, she heard many rumors that sword god Zhou would come to stop Zhou Yalong's coronation. "Humph, Lin Guanyu is here. Unless he wants to die, he will not dare to come. It's good that he's here. This way, your future husband's position as the emperor will be stable." Zhang Lanya snorted coldly as she thought about how to convince Su Xianxian. Having heard that, Su Xianxian did not speak anymore. Her thoughts had already drifted away. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to astral projection level 2. He wore an exquisite purple robe and looked handsome and noble. It was the Rui purple cloud robe. The defense of this robe was much higher than the white dragon golden robe. Even the silver grade legendary sword could not pierce through it. After wearing it, it was as light as if he was not wearing it at all. The group began packing their things and prepared to leave for Great Zhou. Daoya Old Man walked up to him and chuckled as he asked, "Lin Guanyu has arrived in Great Zhou. Are you sure you want to go?" Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "It's good that he's here." He was already confident that he could defeat Huang Hantian. Although Huang Hantian was not at the great realization stage, he could stand against Lin Guanyu. This meant that Lin Guanyu was only at a low level in the great realization stage. Great Zhou would be the place where Lin Guanyu would fall. Actually, he did not hate Lin Guanyu. Instead, he admired Lin Guanyu. There were not many people in the world who were so determined to take revenge for his sister. But this was the world. If Lin Guanyu wanted to kill him, then he had to kill Lin Guanyu. The strong preyed on the weak. This was the law of the jungle. If you can defeat Lin Guanyu, won't you be able to enter the northern wilderness top 100 directly? Daoya old man rubbed his chin and said in a mocking tone. But he did not think that it was possible. Lin Guanyu was the Baba Blade Master. It was already good enough to fight to a draw. Zhou Xuanji smiled and did not speak further. After a while, the group packed up and began their journey. Zhou Xuanji looked at Chongming Demon Monarch and said, "Are you ready?" Chongming Demon Monarch was a little stunned and asked, "Ready for what?" Pfft, Jiang Shui covered her mouth and giggled. The others laughed too. The little black snake, who was coiled around Small Air's neck, said, "Of course, to be a tank. When we reach Great Zhou, you will have to defend against Great Zhou's army." "What the, are you serious?" Chongming Demon Monarch trembled and asked anxiously. Although he had thick skin and flesh, how could he defend against an empire alone? The red Qilin, which was already as big as a dog, bared its teeth at him, as though it was encouraging him. Will it be a sneak attack, or will it be a thunderbolt from the clear sky? Han Shenhua asked as he rubbed his hands. He looked excited. Once they succeeded, they would all be famous across the world. Zhou Xuanji would no longer be the only one in the limelight. Chapter 193. On the mountain path, Zhou Xuanji strolled ahead with a fruit in his hand. Jiang Shui walked beside him. Chongming Demon Monarch walked in front, while Han Shenhua and the little black snake followed behind. Daoya old man walked to the side, while the others trained with their swords. Big and Small Air circled in the air to scout for them. Zhou Xuanji looked at the two of them and asked curiously, "Why can't they speak?" The two dragon eagles were already at the 4th rank. If it were any other demon, they could transform into human form. Maybe they are born handicapped? Jiang Shui guessed as she looked at Zhou Xuanji. The expression in her eyes made him confused. "What's wrong?" He touched his face and asked. "Nothing. I just felt a faint strand of violet qi between your brows." Jiang Shui shook her head. She rubbed her eyes and looked at him seriously. "It's gone now. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me." Zhou Xuanji smiled proudly. "Maybe my monarchical violet qi intimidated you." Jiang Shui rolled her eyes and said, "You? Only you can't intimidate me in the whole world. You are the one I'm least afraid of." "Not bad, not bad. From now on, you will be in charge of my wives and concubines." You want to have a group of wives and concubines? Can't I? No. Can I take a few less? How many? 8? Are you itching for a beating? The two began to bicker, which livened up the atmosphere. With their speed, it would take them at least a month to reach the royal city of Great Zhou. They were not in a hurry. It was best to arrive on the day of the coronation. Only then would it be interesting. The main character always arrived at the most crucial moment. Along the way, the group chatted about the past and the present, enjoying the scenery. At the same time, all the checkpoints around Great Zhou were filled with people. Many cultivators from other empires or factions came to join in the fun. Especially the royal city of Great Zhou, it was extremely noisy. In the royal palace, Great Shang State Advisor Yang Zhongtian looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou with a smile. The generals on both sides looked alert. It's time for Great Zhou and Great Shang to bury the hatchet, Emperor Yan of Zhou said slowly. He stared at Yang Zhongtian and sighed in amazement. Back then, I had yet to ascend to the throne, and Yang Xindi was still young. The few of us traveled around the world together. How carefree it was. Unfortunately, things remain the same, but people have changed. Listening to his words, Yang Zhongtian and Shitan Changshe revealed looks of nostalgia. Their time had passed. Yang Zhongtian sternly said, our emperor also has the same intention. Great Zhou has left you, Great Shang has left Haoqi alliance. If the two empires can join hands and support each other, it will definitely be a win-win situation. Emperor Yan of Zhou nodded and started to chat with Yang Zhongtian about the past. The two of them did not even mention the Hanin divine sect. It seemed harmonious, but there was actually an undercurrent surging. If it wasn't for the fact that the Hanin divine sect had a marriage alliance with Great Zhou, Great Shang probably wouldn't have lowered their heads and come here. Right, have Zong Kuiming come in. Emperor Yan of Zhou suddenly ordered. Hearing this, a general immediately left. Yang Zhongtian's expression changed as he asked, why is he in the Zhou dynasty? Most of the civil and military officials in the hall were in an uproar. Even Zhou Yalong looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou in surprise. He owes me his life. Emperor Yan of Zhou replied calmly, a slight smile on his lips. If one did not look closely, it would be difficult to notice. Yang Zhongtian's expression flickered as he fell silent. Soon, Zong Kuiming entered the hall. Ha ha ha, Emperor Yan of Zhou, your Zhou dynasty is indeed prosperous. Great Zhou's women are also quite tasty. I like that whatever tower, oh, drunken spring tower. A hearty laugh sounded out, followed by Zong Kuiming. He was dressed in black clothes with red silk and had a green crown on his head. His face was not handsome, but he gave off a ferocious aura. This was especially so for the red tattoo on the right side of his face, which looked like a blood-red claw. Zong Kuiming was one of the Northern Wilderness top 100, and his strength was not inferior to Lin Guanyu's. No one knew which sect he was from, but 1,000 years ago, he had appeared out of nowhere and saved the Hunyuan Empire. Hunyuan's emperor had personally received him, and his name had shaken the world ever since. This person's personality was domineering and his temper was quite explosive, but he had a benevolent and righteous heart, and he loved to help those in need. Zong Kuiming glanced at Yang Zhongtian and smiled as he said, Ho, an old goat like you came as well. How is the Fury Buddha? The outcome of the last battle was not decided yet. Next time, I will personally pay him a visit. When Yang Zhongtian heard this, his face instantly turned ugly. Zong Kuiming looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou and cursed, I met Lin Guanyu. That fellow still has a scowling face, and his little sister definitely has a scowling face as well. How did you endure it? Emperor Yan of Zhou gave a slight smile and said, I'll be counting on Brother Zong's help in ascending to the throne. No problem, no problem. Zong Kuiming waved his hand, and then he walked over to Zhou Yalong and clicked his tongue with admiration. You really resemble your imperial father. But why do you seem like a short-lived ghost? When Zhou Yalong heard that, his face instantly turned green. Emperor Yan of Zhou frowned and said, Brother Zong, don't tease a child. We will discuss the matter of the venue first. Zong Kuiming grinned when he heard this, and then he turned around and walked to the center of the hall. Don't worry. With me here, even Xian Xianghua can't leave, let alone Sword God Zhou. Zong Kuiming said conceitedly, causing Yun Zhongtian to shake his head. You can indeed deal with Sword God Zhou. But you want to deal with Xian Xianghua? He was probably courting death. A month later, Zhou Xuanji and the others came to the top of a mountain. Looking into the distance, they could see the high walls of Great Zhou's border pass at the end of the forest. Leave a big and small air nearby, or else we will be exposed too easily. The little black snake said. If the two dragon eagles had transformed, it would be fine. But they were so big that they were too eye-catching. The red qilin was already covered with black fur and looked like a black dog. Fortunately, its horns were not long and could be wrapped around its ears. Zhou Xuanji nodded and looked up at a big and small air, who were circling above him. Hide yourselves and don't get caught by others, understand? He said. The two dragon eagles tilted their heads before flying deep into the forest. The group continued to fly toward the border pass. After flying past the forest, they saw many cultivators walking toward the border pass on the plain. Looking from above, they looked like a long line of ants. Soon, they landed and lined up to enter Great Zhou. Thousands of people lined up in front of them. It was a majestic and noisy scene. Why are there so many people? Won't the royal capital be even more crowded? Jiang Shui said in amazement. There were hundreds of such entrances, and there were already so many people today. It was hard to estimate how many people there were in the royal capital. A young master in front of them turned around and smiled as he waved his fan. Actually, most people are here to see Sword God Zhou. Ever since he was revealed to be the Prince of Great Zhou, countless rumors have been spreading. Everyone thinks that with Sword God Zhou's personality, he would not allow the son of the enemy who killed his mother to ascend to the throne. After that, a look of admiration appeared on his face. A muscular man in front of him turned around and grinned. Lin Guanyu, Emperor Yan of Zhou, Hanin divine sect, and so many powerful cultivators are guarding Great Zhou's royal capital. Do you think Sword God Zhou dares to come? Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have thought that Sword God Zhou would line up here like them. Chapter 194. No matter how many powerful enemies there are, Sword God Zhou still dares to charge in. Zhao Zongjian scoffed and the young master in front of him nodded. Seeing that there were so many of them, the burly man didn't say anything. He just shook his head and laughed. In his eyes, Sword God Zhou was being praised too highly. Sooner or later, he would fall miserably. Jiang Shui curled her lips and said in a low voice, "It seems like there are many people who look up to you." In the team of a few thousand people, what she heard the most was how powerful Sword God Zhou was. Zhou Xuanji chuckled at her, hiding his achievements and fame. In fact, he was also lamenting. Didn't I just do those things? Is it worth so many people singing praises? It was really strange. There were no phones or computers in the northern wilderness region, nor was there any internet. Why did it feel like news was more developed than on Earth? Whatever he did, news would spread quickly. It could only be said that people were afraid of fame as pigs were afraid of being fat. Time passed. Only after 2 hours did Zhou Xuanji and the others enter. They were all using pseudonyms. In any case, as long as they paid enough spirit stones, the border guards wouldn't stop them. This was also the unspoken rule of the dynasties. If the strong couldn't stop them, it wouldn't matter even if the weak blocked them. It was better to make more money. After entering, everyone walked slowly. After all, there was still some time before the day of ascension. There are so many people, Emperor Yan of Zhou really knows how to create momentum. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in wonder. Looking around, there were people everywhere, all rushing towards the Great Zhou imperial city. Emperor Yan of Zhou had announced that he was going to ascend 3 years ago, and he had arranged a marriage with the Hanin divine sect. He had even announced Lin Guanyu's arrival, causing Great Zhou to become the most talked about empire in the northern wilderness. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, there were many intentions behind it. Xiao Jinghong nodded and said, "I'm afraid he's trying to intimidate Master so that Master won't dare to come." Daoya old man smiled faintly and said, "That might not be the case." Xiao Jinghong asked curiously. However, the old man just smiled and shook his head, not saying anything. Zhou Xuanji, on the other hand, was very relaxed. After all, he had already experienced many fierce battles, and his mental fortitude was already extraordinary. The closer he got to Great Zhou's royal city, the more Zhou Xuanji thought back to the days when he was young in Great Zhou's royal palace. At that time, the ones who accompanied him the most were palace maids and nannies. He shook his head and smiled, no longer thinking about it. On the day that Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, he would definitely flip the heavens and earth upside down. 3 days later, they stopped by the river to rest. Chongming demon monarch used the little black snake as a whip and whipped it on the ground. He called it tempering his body. "Old ox. Didn't you eat?" The little black snake was still very strong-willed and clamored. When Chongming Demon Monarch heard this, he forcefully threw him onto the ground, causing the ground to crack. Afterward, the little black snake fainted and blood flowed out of its mouth as if it was dead. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and cursed, "Are you killing snakes?" Chongming Demon Monarch quickly put down the little black snake and said pitifully, "It's the one who asked me to use force. He was already gentle enough. Who told this fellow to court death?" The others also surrounded him and added insult to injury. They reprimanded Chongming Demon Monarch, causing him to hate the little black snake even more. Daoya Old Man stood by the river, his right hand constantly calculating something. Strange, why is the fate of the great Zhou being blinded? Something is wrong, something is wrong. He muttered to himself, appearing very distressed. Just then, he noticed a figure walking out of the woods across the river. It was a monster. It had a tiger's body and a human's face. It was covered in white fur and looked like a child. It stared at Daoya Old Man and opened its mouth to say something. Daoya Old Man's expression changed drastically, and he frowned. "Chongming, catch it." At this moment, Zhou Xuanji's voice came from behind. Next, a black shadow flew past Chongming Demon Monarch's head and dashed toward the demon. The demon was so frightened that it turned around to flee. Unfortunately, Chongming Demon Monarch pressed its butt onto the ground and almost crushed it to death. Trying to escape. Chongming Demon Monarch laughed disdainfully as he spoke. Soon, he brought the demon to Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji asked Daoya Old Man, "What were you guys talking about?" Daoya Old Man turned around and said, "It told me that we are in great trouble." The group frowned. What did that mean? Daoya Old Man shrugged his shoulder and said, "It said that we captured a very important person and that we will be in great trouble sooner or later. I don't know anything else." Zhou Xuanji turned to look at the tiger-bodied, human-faced demon and asked, "Can you speak?" Although the demon was terrified, it acted as though it could not understand human language. Seeing this, he immediately took out the truth sword and stabbed it with his sword. "Tell me, who did we capture, and who is looking for trouble with us?" Facing his interrogation, the demon confessed straight away. "You captured the descendant of the Jiang clan. The great emperor will come for you. Now, all the demons inside and outside of Great Zhou are looking for you." The group heard him and looked at Jiang Shui instinctively with a strange expression. Jiang Shui was stunned too. She suspected that she had heard wrongly. Zhou Xuanji pointed at her and asked, "Is it her? The descendant of the Jiang clan, the great emperor? Could it be the third in the world, Jiang Wudi?" The demon looked at Jiang Shui instinctively and shook his head, saying, "Too young." The group could not help but think of Jiang Shui's grandmother, the crazy old woman. Daoya Old Man clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "Interesting, interesting. No wonder Great Zhou's destiny has been concealed recently. So it was Jiang Wudi's doing." Zhou Xuanji's expression was strange. What? He could already smell the scent of dog blood. Could it be that Jiang Wudi wanted to forcefully take Jiang Shui away and humiliate him by saying that he was not worthy of Jiang Shui? After that, the two of them would have to be separated for several years or even decades, and he would only be able to marry Jiang Shui when he reached the peak. There shouldn't be any problems with the engagement during this period, right? My grandma is still alive? Jiang Shui asked with a frown. She did not show any surprise. The demon looked at her and asked in surprise, "Your grandmother? Could it be that your grandmother is a descendant of the Jiang family? Quick, tell me where she is. We need to return your grandmother to the great emperor as soon as possible." Chongming Demon Monarch couldn't help but ask, "Isn't she a descendant of the Jiang clan? Do you really have to find an old lady?" The demon said disdainfully, "She won't be acknowledged by the Jiang clan." Back then, that descendant of the Jiang clan was engaged to someone, but she ended up falling in love with a mortal and escaped from the Jiang clan, causing the Jiang clan to be humiliated. Now, she even has a granddaughter. The Jiang clan wants to capture her and bring her back to apologize. As for her granddaughter, the Jiang clan hasn't mentioned a word about it. Perhaps they don't even know about it. Zhou Xuanji frowned. The story was indeed melodramatic. But why was the plot not right? Jiang Shue's grandmother? Jiang Shue's expression was complicated. She didn't know what to say. I advise you to release me. The great emperor will personally descend upon the great Zhou dynasty sooner or later. If you protect the descendant of the Jiang clan, you will all die. The monster saw the change in everyone's expression and thought that they were afraid, so he shouted. You're very arrogant. Zhou Xuanji said with squinted eyes. He could sense Jiang Shue's dejection. The feeling of not being accepted by one's family was hard for anyone to accept. What's wrong? I'm advising you out of goodwill. If you dare touch me, you'll be going against the great emperor. You'll die a horrible death. The demon snorted. Even though he was being stepped on, he was still arrogant. An hour later. Everyone sat by the river. Chongming demon monarch held a roasted leg in his hand and smiled. This guy's meat is quite fragrant. In front of them, there was a fire rack with a tiger's body on it. The smell of burnt meat filled the air. Chapter 195. The group began talking about Jiang Wudi as they ate the barbecued meat. Daoya old man spoke the most. He had lived for thousands of years and was the most experienced after all. The Jiang clan was one of the oldest clans in the human race, and Jiang Wudi was even more unfathomable. His highest ranking in the World Millennium Duel was second. Unfortunately, at that time, he encountered Xian Xianghua at her peak, and was utterly defeated. Putting aside Xian Xianghua and Yang Di, who reigned supreme in the world, Jiang Wudi was as powerful as a god. The rise of each empire had the Jiang clan behind them. There were also disciples from the Jiang clan in the 8 sanctums. They had infiltrated every corner of the human race. It's okay. He's looking for the crazy old woman anyway. We will leave after we finish this, Beixiao Wangjian said indifferently. Northern Sword Valiant said nonchalantly. They finally understood why the crazy old lady would abandon Jiang Shui. It was to protect her. But what about the fact that she owed him money? If she did not owe money, Jiang Shui and Zhou Xuanji would not be homeless. Zhou Xuanji looked at Jiang Shui, who was beside him. She hugged her knees and remained silent. He asked, Do you want to look for your grandma? After this is over, I will bring you to her. Jiang Shui shook her head and said, Forget it. Maybe I will become a burden to her if I look for her. If she was not a burden, why would she abandon her? There was another possibility, which was that her grandma was already dead. Regardless of the reason, she did not want to pursue it. That's right. Everyone has their own path. The conflict between your grandma and the Jiang clan should be settled during your parents' generation. You have your own life. Daoya old man said with a smile as he stroked his long beard. He paused for a moment before continuing with deep meaning, Follow Xuanji and cultivate well. When he becomes the top cultivator in the world, you can support your grandma. Jiang Shui nodded and said excitedly, I want to enter the Northern Wilderness top 100 too. I want to be the second in the world and suppress Jiang Wudi. Zhou Xuanji smiled, Okay. I will be the first in the world, and you will be the second. This girl had really grown up. Her heart was much stronger than he imagined. If so, then I will be the third in the world and suppress Jiang Wudi. Xiao Jinghong said in high spirits. He believed that he could do it. The others laughed along. I will be the fourth in the world and become the sovereign of the demon race. Tui, I want to be the third. Then I won't fight with you. I'll just be the fifth in the world. Why? The fifth place is mine. Forget it. You won't be able to enter the Northern Wilderness top 100 in this lifetime. The red Qilin tilted its head as it looked at the group fooling around with each other. Its big watery eyes were filled with curiosity. Jiang Shui felt warmth in her heart. She knew that everyone was trying to liven up the atmosphere so that she wouldn't feel so sad. After everyone finished eating the tiger demon's meat, Zhou Xuanji clapped his hands, got up, and said, "Let's go. It's time to go." Jiang Wudi's target was not them. Their target was not Jiang Wudi. Emperor Yan of Zhou's ascension was their current goal. Under the blue sky of the great Zhou imperial city, a huge stone platform that was thousands of meters wide floated in the air above the imperial city. Soldiers flew up and down, setting up altars, flags, and banquets for the guests on the stone platform. This platform was called the Ascension Platform. Emperor Yan of Zhou would ascend here, and at the same time, Zhou Yalong would become the emperor here. The streets of the imperial city were packed with people, and all the inns in the city were full. Countless red lanterns were hung on the streets, and laughter could be heard everywhere. Among the sea of people, many children were playing and chasing each other. The child beggars under the trees by the streets were also talking about ascension and becoming the emperor. In a heavily guarded residence in a corner of the imperial city, Su Xianxian was wearing a bright red wedding dress. She looked at herself in the bronze mirror and was lost in thought. She was still wearing a veil. Previously, it was to reduce trouble, but now, it was to cover her ugliness. "My lady, the envoy from the Shanghai Ziggurat is here too." At this moment, a lady walked in from the gate and said excitedly, "This time, you are going to marry the new emperor of Great Zhou. This will surely shake the northern wilderness region. All the people who came are influential people. The future emperor is better than the little evil lord no matter how you look at it. He's cultured, has powerful cultivation, and is well-read." The lady walked up to Su Xianxian and sighed in admiration. Her tone was filled with envy. "Are you going to marry him?" Su Xianxian asked. The lady heard her and blushed immediately. "I'm of humble birth, how can I marry?" she said shyly. Her heart was already in turmoil. If she were to be a dowry maid, could she become a noble or even a concubine? The more she thought about it, the more excited she became, as though she had found a direction in life. Su Xianxian sighed faintly and did not speak anymore. At the same time, Emperor Yan of Zhou and Great Zhou's officials and generals were approaching the Shanghai Ziggurat's envoy, Lu Longlin. "His Majesty, the Flame Emperor, is really powerful. Each of his sons is more powerful than the other. I tested Zhou Xuanji personally, and I was the one who passed his information to the ziggurat." Lu Longlin chuckled, which made Zhou Yalong, who was behind Emperor Yan of Zhou, change his expression slightly. The other officials looked at each other in dismay, knowing that they did not come with good intentions. Emperor Yan of Zhou laughed heartily and said, "Thank you, Brother Lu, for taking care of me. If Yalong breaks through to great realization in the future, please take care of the northern wilderness top 100. Even though Lu Longlin's cultivation was lower than his, he still had to call him brother. It was because he could not afford to offend the Shanghai Ziggurat. "No problem, no problem." Lu Longlin waved his hand and smiled. Seeing Zong Kuaming, he smiled and said, "Oh, Brother Zong is here too." After that, he walked toward Zong Kuaming. Emperor Yan of Zhou looked at an old official beside him and asked, "Are you ready?" The old official replied respectfully, "Everything is ready until the time comes." In 20 hours, the ascension ceremony would begin. Following this, Emperor Yan of Zhou told Zhou Yalong to make preparations. Before he ascended, he had to see Zhou Yalong get married and see his son ascend to the throne. Only then would he be at ease. Just like that, all of the officials started to get busy. Great Zhou's royal guards and soldiers landed on the walls of the royal city, waiting information. There were also many soldiers riding on flying wolves in the air above the royal city, patrolling. The sun set and the moon rose, and the sun rose in the east. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight streaked across the great Zhou royal city, figures walked through the air towards the ascension stage. There were guests from the Hanin divine sect, Great Shang, Shanghai Ziggurat, Great Qin, and other large factions. Yin Zhongtian and Great Chen's officials chatted as they looked outside the city, as if they were waiting for something. Soon, they were all seated. Looking down, there were 2,000 banquets on the ascension stage, and the higher one's status was, the closer they sat. There was a tall tower at the edge of the stone stage near the palace. Great Zhou's flag was at the top of the tower, fluttering in the wind. Looking down, everyone in the city had walked out of their houses and were on the streets or balconies, looking up at the ascension stage. Nearly 10 million people were looking up. This was an unprecedented event in Great Zhou's history. Shitan Changshe leapt up and landed below the tall tower. He stabbed his long saber into the ground and stood there like a guardian deity, his face expressionless. Royal guards landed at the edge of the ascension stage, silently waiting for Emperor Yan of Zhou to descend. Chapter 196. Zhou Yalong, who was wearing a golden dragon robe, led a group of princes and princesses out of the palace. He wore a red embroidered ball on his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes could not hide the excitement in them. He was about to become the ruler of Great Zhou. Second brother, from now on, you are the son of heaven. Zhou Qingxin said enviously. As for the Great Zhou crown prince, he did not come. Back then, he had made a big fool of himself and guessed Zhou Xuanji's identity. But he had already disappeared from the world, and no one knew who did it. Emperor Yan of Zhou did not pursue this matter, but every time they thought about it, they would feel terrified. Please support me in the future. Zhou Yalong chuckled, but he didn't turn around to look at Zhou Qingxin. Seeing this, Princess Xuanya pouted and thought to herself, what are you pretending for? She hated Zhou Yalong's hypocrisy the most. He was clearly looking down on everyone, yet he was still pretending to be polite. Soon, the imperial family members were seated. At a glance, there were more than 10,000 people on the ascension platform. There were more than 10 major factions, and there were even guests from holy lands and dynasties. Beside Princess Xuanya sat an exquisite young lady. She wore a blue dress and was also a princess. Her name was Princess Lingling, and she was Consort Chen's adopted daughter. After Lady Zhao Xian's incident, Emperor Yan of Zhou had betrothed her to Zhou Xuanji, which was equivalent to a ghost marriage. This caused her to become a laughingstock, and only Princess Xuanya treated her sincerely. Sister, there are so many forces here. Will something happen? Princess Lingling asked in a low voice. She felt somewhat uneasy. Princess Xuanya shook her head and said with a smile, don't worry, they are all here to help. After that, she glanced at Zhou Yalong and shook her head, I don't know if the Great Zhou dynasty will prosper in the future. It would be great if your husband could become the emperor. Ever since she knew that sword god Zhou was Zhou Xuanji, she had teased Princess Lingling many times. Without Zhou Xuanji, Princess Xuanya might have already died in Cloud Swallow City. She began to worship sword god Zhou a long time ago. She watched as sword god Zhou's name shook the world step by step, which made her look forward to meeting him again. Big sister, what are you talking about? It doesn't count. I don't even know. Princess Lingling blushed and pouted. Their voices were very soft, and the ascension platform was very noisy, so no one paid attention to their conversation. Time continued to pass. The sun was getting hotter and hotter. Noon had arrived. It's time. Shitan Changshe suddenly shouted, his voice resounding through the sky, causing countless people to tremble in fear. However, he was the great general of the state, so no one dared to scold him. All the civil and military officials flew over and knelt in front of the tower. Zhou Yalong, Zhou Qingxin, Princess Xuanya, and the other princes and princesses also did the same. The concubines in the harem knelt beside the tower, their eyes red and heartbroken. Emperor Yan of Zhou, courtesy named Zissou, was born when Great Zhou was in danger. He wandered about, but he did not forget his roots. After learning a divine ability, he killed millions of Great Zhou's enemies with his sword. He was recognized by the previous emperor and was made the crown prince. After the previous emperor died, Zhou Zixu ascended to the throne and became the emperor. He was called the Flame Emperor, and people called him Emperor Yan of Zhou. Shitan Changshe spoke. His voice was like a torrent, and his tone rose and fell. It was extremely inciting, causing the entire imperial city to quieten down. Millions of people began to listen to his speech. After Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended to the throne, he got rid of the surrounding demon race and shocked the other countries, leading Great Zhou to become more powerful. He started to talk endlessly about Emperor Yan of Zhou's achievements, causing the people of Great Zhou's blood to boil. Putting aside those personal matters, Emperor Yan of Zhou was indeed a qualified emperor. He was never weak to outsiders, and he was never unreasonable to his own people. He was a powerful and benevolent emperor. Great Zhou could not do without him, so he had always been the emperor. If he had stepped down 100 years earlier, he would not have needed to ascend. It had to be known that the higher one's cultivation was, the higher one's status would be after ascending. It was said that when ascending, there would be a door. Once one stepped through it, one would shed their mortal body and their cultivation would soar. How much one could soar depended on one's foundation. Shitan Changshe spoke for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before saying, "We respectfully invite your majesty to descend." Following this, a domineering aura covered the entire city. Emperor Yan of Zhou appeared at the top of the tower, looking down at Great Zhou's officials, generals, princes, princesses, and concubines. He wore a golden emperor's robe and a crown inlaid with pearls. He looked high and mighty, and the aura of an emperor was displayed to its fullest, causing people's hearts to tremble. "Today, we have ascended, and Great Zhou is in your hands." As he spoke, he pointed at Zhou Yalong. Zhou Yalong raised his head and said excitedly, "Your son will definitely lead Great Zhou to prosperity and will not let father down." Emperor Yan of Zhou smiled in satisfaction. At this moment, the tower beneath his feet suddenly lit up with candles. In front of every window sill on the tower, a layer of faint purple mist enveloped the tower. A powerful ray of light shot out from the sun and landed on Emperor Yan of Zhou's body. Ascension. Emperor Yan of Zhou slowly flew up and said, "From today onwards, you are the Emperor of Great Zhou. Before we ascend, we want to see you start a family and have an empress." Hearing this, Zhou Yalong immediately got up. Shitan Changshe shouted, "Emperor Zhou Yuan's marriage ceremony has begun. Hanin Divine Sect Saintess, Su Xianxian, please ascend the ascension stage." As he spoke, waves of obscene sounds came from the edge of the royal city. A group of Hanin Divine Sect disciples carrying a red sedan chair walked through the air, and everyone in the city could see them. "They're here. I heard that Su Xianxian is Great Shang's #1 beauty. I wonder if that's true." "It's true, even Great Shang's emperor wants his son to marry her. It's a pity for the little evil lord, I wonder who crippled him. I heard that it was done by one of Sword God Zhou's black snakes, but it's very likely that they're trying to slander him. Fine, everything is done by our Sword God Zhou. Haoqi Alliance is truly shameless." The entire city was filled with heaven-shaking discussions. Most people were very excited. Ascension was something that was rarely seen in a lifetime. Within the sunlight, Emperor Yan of Zhou slowly rose up, seeming to give off a divine light. Zhou Yalong turned around and took a deep breath. Even though he had never met Su Xianxian before, her beauty had spread throughout the world, so how could he not feel anticipation? Soon, the Hanin Divine Sect's red sedan chair landed. It was 800 or so meters away from Zhou Yalong, and red flowers bloomed on the ground between them, looking incredibly beautiful. Standing in front of the red sedan chair, a woman in a green dress said softly, "Miss, it's time to come out." However, she did not receive a reply. Everyone's gazes gathered on her, including Emperor Yan of Zhou's. However, Su Xianxian did not come out. Within the sedan chair, Su Xianxian, who was wearing a red veil, tightly gripped her clothes. She was currently struggling with herself. She understood that if she stepped out, she would no longer have freedom. If she did not come out, she would definitely die. Shitan Changshe frowned. If Su Xianxian did not come out, it would be a slap to Great Zhou's face. He looked at Hanin Divine Sex Elder Zhang Lanya. Zhang Lanya's expression was also unsightly, and she immediately sent a telepathic message. Swoosh. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound came. It was a sword. Wind-cutter sword. It quickly landed in front of the red sedan chair and pierced into the stone surface. In that instant, everyone turned to look. What wife? You're going to die today, don't harm the lady. Zhou Xuanji's arrogant laughter sounded throughout the heavens and earth, causing countless people's expressions to change. Chapter 197. Great Zhou's royal city was in an uproar. Someone dared to come at such a crucial moment? Could it be? Everyone became excited and quickly guessed the identity of the newcomer. Zhou Yalong's eyes were red, and extreme murderous intent flowed out of them. Under everyone's gaze, Zhou Xuanji and the others flew over on their swords like a group of immortals. The soldiers on the city walls wanted to stop them but were all injured by Zhou Xuanji's legendary swords. On the ascension platform, everyone got up. Emperor Yan of Zhou, who was under the sunlight, narrowed his eyes. He's here indeed. Yang Zhongtian mumbled to himself with a strange smile in his eyes. The royal city was in an uproar. Sword God Zhou is here. I knew Zhou Xuanji would not let Zhou Yalong off. Is he going to fight for the throne? TSK, Sword God Zhou is too impulsive. Why didn't he wait for His Majesty to ascend before coming out? Unparalleled swords weigh in the northern wilderness, not inferior to the ancient sword emperor. This is Zhou Xuanji. He wants to prove himself in front of the emperor. Everyone began discussing excitedly. Most of them came for Sword God Zhou, so how could they not be excited when they saw Sword God Zhou coming? Stop! Emperor Yan of Zhou said. The soldiers heard him and immediately retreated. Zhou Xuanji brought Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others to the ascension platform. He looked down at Zhou Yalong and said, Zhou Yalong, the heavenly Tao has its own cycle, and karma and retribution will come sooner or later. Today, your retribution has come. He was filled with murderous intent. This made many people nervous, especially Great Zhou's ministers and generals. They did not want anything to happen to Zhou Yalong, because if anything happened to him, Great Zhou would be finished. Zhou Xuanji could not become the Lord of Great Zhou. After all, his hatred was too great. Within the red palanquin, Su Xianxuan's hands loosened her grip on her clothes. Under the red veil, she smiled slightly. Outside, Zhou Yalong looked at Zhou Xuanji furiously and said, the one who should be punished is you. The hatred of killing his mother was irreconcilable. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. He flipped his right hand, and a silver spear appeared in his hand. You killed her entire clan and massacred an entire city. Whose punishment is greater? I only killed your mother because your mother killed my mother. You even tried to kill me. Zhou Xuanji pointed at Huang Lianxin and said. His voice was so loud that everyone in the city could hear him. Huang Lianxin said furiously, Zhou Yalong, when you entered the city, my people treated you so warmly. Yet, you pretended to go berserk and slaughtered my people. How cruel is that? Why aren't you killed by the heavens and earth? Why do you still want to be the emperor of Great Zhou? I'm afraid the entire Great Zhou will be slaughtered by you in the future. Boom! The whole city was in an uproar. Countless people were dumbfounded. Zhou Yalong's reputation had always been good. Although he was not as world-shaking as Zhou Xuanji, few people had any objections to him becoming the emperor of Great Zhou. Zhou Yalong didn't panic and responded calmly, you are the Ghost Emperor tribe, and your tribe leader is Xinhao Sex Huang Ming. You are all demons, so what if I kill you? After he had committed the crime, he had fantasized about it. Faced with such a situation, he had already memorized the lines he had prepared. Zhou Xuanji coldly snorted and said, "You make it sound so dignified. They treated you warmly, but you massacred the entire city. Who wouldn't think that you are the devil? Just because the descendants of the nefarious devil are the nefarious devils? Are there definitely no devils among righteous cultivators? You don't believe your words and your methods are cruel. You are even more devilish than a devil, just like your mother. She kills anyone she doesn't like. You are all devils disguised as righteous. Today, I'm going to kill you right here." After saying this, Zhou Xuanji raised his right hand and the God Emperor sword appeared in his hand. The God Emperor Qi wrapped around him, looking incredibly eerie. Zhou Yalong's expression immediately became unsightly. This boy's words were filled with needles and were too hurtful. Before he could say anything, Zhou Xuanji directly unleashed the heavenly lights. His sword Qi turned into the heavenly lights and shot towards Zhou Yalong incredibly quickly. They were like birds flashing past. Zhou Yalong's eyes widened and he instinctively raised his spear to block, but he was unable to dodge in time. On the ascension stage, over 10,000 people felt a powerful gust of wind blow past. Humph. A cold harumph sounded out as Lin Guanyu appeared in front of Zhou Yalong and destroyed the heavenly lights with a saber strike. Sword Qi and saber Qi swept out in all directions, shaking the entire ascension stage. Seeing Lin Guanyu appear, Zhou Xuanji was expressionless, and Xiao Jingheng, Jiang Shui, and the others did not panic. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in amazement and said, "Interesting." Chongming demon monarch cursed out, "Do you dare to duel with our master?" Zhou Yalong did not reply, and he savagely glared at Zhou Xuanji. Lin Guanyu raised his saber and coldly laughed as he said, "You don't know that I'm in Great Zhou?" With his strength, he was confident that he could kill Zhou Xuanji and the others. However, he was afraid that Xian Xianghua was there as well. Zhou Xuanji smirked and condescendingly laughed as he said, "You think I'm here to kill an ant like Zhou Yalong? I'm here to kill an old dog like you. Lin Guanyu, you're the Baba Blade Master, yet you indulge your own little sister and bully the weak. You're not worthy of being called an expert." Hearing this, Lin Guanyu frowned. This boy's mouth was quite vicious. For him to be so fearless, could it be that he really had something to rely on? Everyone's gazes fell on Zhou Xuanji. Hanin Divine Sect Elder Zhang Lanya frowned, looking quite confused. Where did Zhou Xuanji get his courage from? Yang Zhongtian thought to himself, and Lu Longlin gulped, looking quite expectant. "You want to kill me by yourself?" Lin Guanyu asked with a double meaning. Zhou Xuanji took out the white dragonbone sword and he Geminjiu. He gripped the God Emperor sword and white dragonbone sword with both hands and stepped on He Geminjiu as he approached Lin Guanyu. "I'm going to kill you in front of everyone in the world," Zhou Xuanji said as he laughed. After saying this, he ferociously used the 8-step sword lunge and rushed at Lin Guanyu. Lin Guanyu raised his saber and slashed to the left, his movements incredibly sharp. Zhou Xuanji appeared on his left out of nowhere and slashed out with his 2 swords, but was blocked by his saber. Astral projection? No wonder you're so arrogant, Lin Guanyu said as he coldly harumphed. However, he was 2 stages higher than Zhou Xuanji, so how could he fear him? As long as Xian Xianghua was not here, Zhou Xuanji was a dead person in his eyes. He immediately flung Zhou Xuanji away, and he chased after Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji directly unleashed the power of the God Emperor sword and white dragonbone sword. A God Emperor appeared on his body, and a white dragon coiled around his body. His aura was incredibly majestic, and the dragon's roar shook the heavens. Zhou Xuanji sensed his sword, and he quickly dodged Lin Guanyu's saber before unleashing the 6-path sword shadow and heavenly lights. Sword Qi rushed over from 6 directions, instantly inundating Lin Guanyu. Boom! An explosion sounded out above the royal city, and everyone stared with wide eyes. Facing Lin Guanyu, did Zhou Xuanji really have the power to fight back? Even Emperor Yan of Zhou looked quite surprised. Lin Guanyu was in the Northern Wilderness top 100, and even though he was at the bottom, he was still a top-tier expert in the Northern Wilderness. He had charged into the empire by himself and was able to escape unscathed. Zhou Xuanji had already grown to such a level. Zhou Yalong's body trembled, and his eyes seemed to spit out flames. He inwardly roared, "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Chapter 198. Lin Guanyu charged out from the explosion, his entire body burning with a layer of white flame, allowing him to remain unscathed. His eyes were cold and sharp, and he swung his saber extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, he destroyed Zhou Xuanji's six-path sword shadow. Zhou Xuanji charged at him again, and the two began to compete in sword and saber techniques in the air. With two swords in hand, his attacks were extremely fast, and countless sword shadows appeared one after another. On the other hand, although Lin Guanyu only relied on his blade, he had the upper hand and forced Zhou Xuanji to retreat. Although Zhou Xuanji had two glorious gold legendary swords to compensate for the difference in their cultivation stages, it was still difficult for him to defeat Lin Guanyu. He was not in a hurry. After all, he had a trump card. He could use Lin Guanyu as a whetstone. The God Emperor sword and the White Dragon Bone sword's power began to merge in the battle. He displayed various sword techniques and began to gradually turn the situation around. White Crane sword technique. Fiery sword art. 36 paths Jade Shao sword. Trisource vein severing sword. Soul Eater slash. Moonlit wind sword dance. Tempest Skybreaker slash. His sword techniques were endless, and his sword intents were constantly changing. Soon, Lin Guanyu was countered. In the eyes of others, Sword God Zhou's sword technique was so pleasing to the eye that it was visually stunning. He kept moving around Lin Guanyu, his sword flashing, fierce and domineering. So powerful. Zhou Xuanji is already on the same level as Baba Blade Master. So powerful. This is Sword God Zhou. Every time he appears, his strength increases by leaps and bounds. Lin Guanyu is in trouble now. See that? That's the number 1 on the Northern Wilderness Prodigy leaderboard. Oh my god, could Sword God Zhou really kill Lin Guanyu? Look, even the Son of Heaven is moved. In the Imperial City, countless people exclaimed and shouted. Lin Guanyu was not from Great Zhou, and Zhou Xuanji was their prince. It was easy for them to choose a side. Moreover, almost all the people from other places wanted to watch this battle. If they had no expectations for Zhou Xuanji, why would they come? High in the sky. Zhou Xuanji used all sorts of sword wills as he pleased, which caused his battle style to change rapidly. Lin Guanyu felt a headache. It was his first time encountering such an opponent. His cultivation is only at leaving Aperture Realm, so why is his strength and speed on par with mine? Lin Guanyu thought as he gritted his teeth. Could it be that Zhou Xuanji's sword was not simple? No matter what, he must kill Zhou Xuanji. Otherwise, if he couldn't avenge his sister, his reputation would be ruined. Then, his saber speed suddenly increased. His right arm danced wildly, and his saber chi shot out and sent Zhou Xuanji flying backward. He abruptly sheathed his sword. His left hand gripped the hilt, and both his hands gripped the saber. His aura skyrocketed. In an instant, the entire world seemed to freeze. The clouds stopped, and the wind stopped. He stared fixedly at Zhou Xuanji and said, "You are powerful indeed, but a life for a life. Don't blame me for being impolite." With that said, he slashed out with his saber. The saber flashed. Everyone subconsciously closed their eyes, including Yang Zhongtian, Zhou Yalong, and Daoya old man Zhou Xuanji also closed his eyes, but his hands did not stop moving. He directly used the sky-dominating divine sword. The unparalleled sword art of the ancient sword emperors. The two swords slashed out with an indomitable will. The momentum was so strong that it seemed like it could break through all obstacles. At this moment, he was one of the 9 emperors of the Sword Dao, the hegemon Sword Emperor. Boom! The sword chi and saber chi collided, causing the clouds in the sky to tremble. A wild gale blew, and the ascension stage trembled. Countless structures in the royal city trembled. Looking up, a visible shockwave appeared behind both of them, sweeping across the sky. Zhou Xuanji's purple clothes fluttered in the wind. Even though his eyes were closed, his aura was not any weaker than Lin Guanyu's. Lin Guanyu's expression changed. This was his most powerful saber art. Even though it was not beautiful, it was incredibly lethal. How could this boy block it? At that moment, Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes. This sword is called the Sky-Dominating Divine Sword, and it's the sword technique that the hegemon Sword Emperor used to dominate the world. Have you seen it before? He asked calmly as he looked at Lin Guanyu. His voice sounded out in everyone's ears. Sky-Dominating Divine Sword. Hegemon Sword Emperor. Zhou Xuanji had actually obtained the legacy of the 9 emperors of the Sword's Way. Lin Guanyu's expression greatly fell. The legend of the hegemon Sword Emperor was incredibly famous. Xian Xianghua's father had been suppressed by the hegemon Sword Emperor for his entire life, and he was the end of the legend. After the hegemon Sword Emperor ascended, there had been no such peerless person in the world. Emperor Yan of Zhou frowned and looked down at Zhou Xuanji. His gaze was a little complicated. He had fantasized about how powerful this boy would be when he grew up, but he did not expect the two of them to be so unfamiliar. Zhou Yalong's face was even more ashen. If Lin Guanyu lost, who could protect him? After witnessing Zhou Xuanji's power, he knew that he was no match for him. I've received the legacies of the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor and the hegemon Sword Emperor. Even though their sword techniques are not enough to convince me, it's more than enough to deal with you. Zhou Xuanji pointed his sword at Lin Guanyu and smiled proudly. He said this intentionally because he did not want to be labeled as the hegemon Sword Emperor's successor. Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor. Lin Guanyu's face turned even darker. Just how many backers did Zhou Xuanji have? After all, he would ascend sooner or later. If he killed Zhou Xuanji, how could he explain himself to the hegemon Sword Emperor and the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor when he ascended? With their divine abilities, they might know about the matters of the mortal realm. The saying that the gods were watching was not groundless. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji took out the other legendary swords. The Crimson Dragon Sword, Frost Wave Sword, Swine Culling Sword, Golden Rock Sword, Heaven Sound Sword, Hell King Sword, Residual Image Sword, Thunderclap Sword, Formless Sword, Furious Ape Sword, Chicken Slaying Sword, Water Driving Sword, Falcon Sword, Magnetic Sword, Phoenix Emperor Sword, Defeating Hell King Sword, Truth Sword, Holy Light Redemption Sword, Snakeskin Sword, Frost King Icebound Sword, and so on. More than 30 legendary swords appeared behind him, all pointing at Lin Guanyu. He activated the 10,000 sword dragon incantation straightaway. All the legendary swords gathered dragon-shaped sword chi and coiled around their blades. The scene was majestic, and countless people's blood boiled. It's coming. Sword God Zhou's most famous sword technique was coming. No one knew what this sword technique was called, but it was powerful and cool. Anyone who saw it would be fascinated. Is Lin Guanyu going to lose? No wonder he's so overpowered. Even the 2 ancient sword emperors were convinced by him. I heard that sword god Zhou could manifest a sword will in an earth-grade sword technique within a day. Even the 9 emperors of the Sword's Way could not compare to him. Can you stop exaggerating? Although I admire Zhou Xuanji, how can his talent be so ridiculous? So domineering. I heard that Zhou Xuanji's goal is 10,000 swords soaring in the sky. Do you think he can do it? The tens of millions of people in the city discussed excitedly, and there were even many people who flew into the air to get a better look. Zhou Xuanji dashed toward Lin Guanyu, and all the legendary swords followed closely behind. The white dragon coiled around the God Emperor, and the other dragon-shaped sword chi followed behind as though they were following the Dragon King. Lin Guanyu stopped thinking and began swinging his blade. No matter what, he must kill Zhou Xuanji today. Let's talk about the future in the future. Clang! The blade and sword clashed. Zhou Xuanji smiled, and all the legendary swords slashed at Lin Guanyu crazily as though they had a mind of their own, catching him off guard. Chapter 199. Clang! 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 Although Lin Guanyu appeared to be in a sorry state when he was surrounded by dozens of divine swords, he still managed to fend them off. Zhou Xuanji felt more and more satisfied. He could also use the glorious gold legendary swords consecutively. The coordination between the legendary swords was also increasing. He was using Lin Guanyu to practice his sword. What's going on? Why are these swords getting stronger and faster? Cold sweat broke out on Lin Guanyu's forehead. Even though his cultivation was strong, he couldn't withstand the attacks of so many divine swords. Very quickly, the Hell King's sword pierced through his shoulder, and fresh blood splattered out. The people on the ascension platform widened their eyes. Lin Guanyu was injured first. Amazing! Princess Xuanya exclaimed. After speaking, she hurriedly covered her mouth, afraid that someone would hear. Zhou Qingxin looked at Zhou Xuanji with a complicated expression. Back then, at the Xia sect, Zhou Xuanji had to avoid even Xia Huio's fury, but now, he could injure Lin Guanyu. How many years had it been? Thinking about himself, his cultivation had barely broken through a small realm. Compared to Zhou Xuanji, he felt like he had been living like a pig all these years. Lu Longlin murmured, is he going to make it into the Northern Wilderness top 100? If he defeated Lin Guanyu, Zhou Xuanji could replace his ranking. When the others heard this, they all swallowed their saliva. At this moment, they felt an indescribable sense of shock. It was as if they were witnessing the rise of a legend. Top 100 of the Northern Wilderness in his early 20s? No one had ever done it before, and probably no one would be able to do it in the future. From the red palanquin, Su Xianxian walked out in her wedding dress. She took off her red veil and looked up at the battle between Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu. This scene was seen by Zhou Yalong, and he was instantly enraged. Previously, this woman refused to come out, but now she came out. Wasn't this a slap to his face? Wait till I ascend to the throne, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Zhou Yalong roared in his heart. The more majestic Zhou Xuanji was, the more irritated he felt. At this moment, Lin Guanyu suddenly landed on the ascension platform. There were many sword wounds on his body, and his aura had become chaotic. He looked up at Zhou Xuanji, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Zhou Xuanji, I admit that you are powerful. You are indeed worthy of the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor and Hegemon Sword Emperor's legacies. Lin Guanyu said in a deep voice. He raised the saber in his hand horizontally, and the gravel under his feet flew up. The little black snake muttered, is this guy going to risk his life? Jiang Shui scoffed, so what? It's still hard to defeat Xian Ji. Although she said that, she was still very surprised. It was the same for the others. They did not expect Zhou Xuanji to be able to face Lin Guanyu head-on and gain the upper hand. In these 3 years, Zhou Xuanji had been cultivating, and no one knew his true power. The moment the divine sword was unsheathed and revealed its sharpness, it truly amazed them. My little disciple is about to soar into the sky. Daoya old man sighed as he stroked his beard. He knew very well what defeating Lin Guanyu meant. Huang Lianxin was the most excited, because she was about to take revenge. Zhou Xuanji gripped the 2 swords in his hands, his body hanging upside down as he spun and dived downwards. All of the legendary swords wrapped around his body and descended as well, looking like a storm of sword chi descending from the sky. Lin Guanyu gripped his saber with both hands and slashed upwards. Wherever the saber pointed, the ground cracked, and saber chi soared into the sky. A loud bang resounded. It shook heaven and earth. It tore apart all noise. The ascension stage tilted from the pressure, and everyone flew up to avoid being injured. Su Xianxian looked at Zhou Xuanji, a look of shock on her face. So he's so powerful, and his face isn't so ordinary. She looked quite dazed as she looked at Zhou Xuanji's unfamiliar handsome face. Thinking back to the reason she had teamed up with Zhou Xuanji, she felt quite complicated. She felt a bit awkward but also a bit sweet. Perhaps this was fate. Zhou Yalong would occasionally look at her, and seeing her like this, he almost exploded in anger. He immediately rushed at Su Xianxian, preparing to teach her a lesson. Zhang Lanya noticed his actions and immediately blocked behind Su Xianxian. No matter what, Su Xianxian was the Hanin divine sex saintess. How could she allow others to get close? Moreover, Zhou Yalong's expression made it seem as if he was going to kill someone. Emperor Zhou, what are you doing? Zhang Lanya asked in a low voice. She intentionally used the words Emperor Zhou to remind Zhou Yalong that his status was not the same as before. Hearing this, Zhou Yalong immediately stopped and deeply breathed in, doing his best to calm his emotions. However, Su Xianxian still did not look back. Her mind was not on him at all. Bitch! Zhou Yalong thought with gritted teeth. Zhang Lanya also noticed Su Xianxuan's gaze, but she did not remind her. The reason was simple and practical. She was also convinced by Zhou Xuanji's power. If Su Xianxian married Zhou Xuanji, it might not be a bad thing. Zhou Xuanji was also a prince of Great Zhou and could fight for the position of emperor. He was so powerful that only the sect lord could rival him. The most important thing was Zhou Xuanji's potential. He was already in the northern wilderness top 100 at the age of 20. Back then, even Xian Xianghua and Yang Di were not so powerful. Once they roped in Zhou Xuanji, the Hanin divine sect would have a chance to soar. The more Zhang Lanya thought about it, the more she liked Zhou Xuanji. Looking at Zhou Yalong again, why did she feel that this guy was so weak? He was not good enough for Su Xianxian. If Zhou Yalong knew what Zhang Lanya was thinking, he would surely vomit blood in anger. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji bounced away suddenly. After a backflip, he turned into countless afterimages and charged toward Lin Guanyu in a straight line. He was extremely fast. Like a bolt of lightning. Pish. Lin Guanyu's chest was split open, and blood splattered all over the ground. Zhou Xuanji landed behind him with blood dripping from the tips of his swords. In that instant, the heavens and earth fell silent. Everyone was tongue-tied and could not believe their eyes. What sword technique is this? Lin Guanyu's expression froze as he mumbled to himself. That slash was too fast. It was so fast that even his eyes could not capture it. With his back facing him, Zhou Xuanji said softly, 10,000 ultimate steps. This was the first time he had used 10,000 ultimate steps against an enemy. You created it? Lin Guanyu asked. He had never heard of this sword technique before, but it was so powerful. If it existed long ago, it would surely be remembered in history. Zhou Xuanji did not reply. He turned around and pointed his sword at the back of Lin Guanyu's head. Before you die, do you have anything to say? Lin Guanyu laughed louder and louder. Finally, he raised his head and guffawed. Swoosh! At this moment, an ear-piercing sound came. Zhou Xuanji raised his left hand instinctively and slashed with the white dragonbone sword. A black sword fell to the ground. He knew who it was without looking back. The sword monarch of Great Zhou. A silhouette flew over from the horizon on a sword. He wore a black robe, and his black hair danced in the wind. His eyes were sharp, and he held a black sword in his hand. Behind him were 4 similar black swords. Zhou Xuanji, today is the day of His Majesty's ascension. It is the day of the new emperor's ascension. Are you sure you want to kill someone here? The sword monarch cried out. His voice was righteous and resounded across the entire city. Zhou Xuanji glanced at him and said, "Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to tell me what to do here?" He did not hold back at all. The sword monarch did not come earlier or later. He came at this moment to gain a good reputation. But would Zhou Xuanji give him face? Chapter 200. Who do you think you are? The sword monarch heard him and could not maintain his composure. He was one of the most famous cultivators in Great Zhou. Zhou Xuanji was once a junior to him. How could he be humiliated like this? Zhou Xuanji. You killed your own sister and mother, and now you want to kill them as well. Are you not afraid of retribution? The sword monarch said with a deep voice. If he allowed Zhou Xuanji to kill Lin Guanyu, Zhou Yalong would die for sure. If Zhou Yalong died, Great Zhou would be finished. Zhou Xuanji did not want to be the emperor, and he was not suitable to be the emperor. In such a situation, he had to protect Zhou Yalong. Zhou Xuanji looked at him sideways and said, "Do you really deserve to be the sword monarch? Back then, the empress of Great Zhou hunted me and my mother. My mother died to protect me, and I was homeless when I was 2 years old. Do you know what I went through to reach where I am today? There are no geniuses in this world. Behind the talent, there are hardships that ordinary people can't imagine. I'm still underage, and the empress of Great Zhou wanted to kill me. To avenge her mother and to protect herself, if it were you, would you be able to endure it?" Lin Guanyu took revenge for his sister. I respect him as a hero. This is how the world is. Death is not unbearable. Only one of us can live. But this is a fight between gentlemen, a fight between powerful cultivators. No one will complain about who lives or dies. Zhou Yalong massacred the entire city. Even if the heavens and earth destroy him, he could not escape death. This is also for the future of Great Zhou. And you? You distort the truth and cannot tell right from wrong. How can someone like you be a grandmaster in the sword's way? How can you be the sword monarch? How can you be worthy of the respect and trust of the billions of people in Great Zhou? Zhou Xuanji's words were like pearls in a loud and clear voice. He did not give the sword monarch any chance to interrupt. His chest heaved and his face turned green from anger. The millions of people in the city heard him and could not help but hate the sword monarch. Zhou Xuanji said it openly and vividly, showing the heroism of a real man. On the other hand, the sword monarch seemed so hypocritical. Who dares to be his enemy? Not only will he die, but he will also lose his reputation. The little black snake sighed in amazement on Chongming Demon's shoulder. I want to learn. Jiang Shui covered her mouth and laughed. I haven't seen anyone win against Xuanji in an argument. In her eyes, no matter what kind of mystery it was good, it made her proud. This is talent. This kid hasn't seen many people since he was young, but his eloquence is amazing, just like his mother. Daoya old man was deeply moved. Seeing that the sword monarch of Great Zhou was rendered speechless, he felt great. Within the sunlight, Emperor Yan of Zhou, who was still rising, tightly frowned. If one looked closely, one would notice that the corners of his mouth were curled up. Over the years, he and the sword monarch of Great Zhou had been on bad terms. He was most worried that after he left, Zhou Yalong would not be able to intimidate the sword monarch. But now, Zhou Xuanji had suppressed the sword monarch to the point that he could not even breathe. Ignorant child. It's obviously murder, but you have to make it sound so dignified. The sword monarch rebuked furiously. He was already on the losing side. He thought that he could give Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu a way out, but he did not expect Zhou Xuanji to reject it. Lin Guanyu seemed to have lost, but it was extremely difficult for Zhou Xuanji to kill him. Baba Blademaster's fearsome reputation was built on countless corpses. Do you know what a man's pride is? To fight for your heart, to fight for your emotions. Do you know that? Zhou Xuanji snorted disdainfully. As he spoke, the Frost King's icebound sword shot out swiftly. Ranged sword propelling. The tip of the sword pointed straight at the sword monarch. The sword monarch raised his sword instinctively, but he was still a step too slow. PFFTT. The Frost King's icebound sword pierced the sword monarch's shoulder. Next, a cold chi seeped out and froze him into an ice sculpture. Wah! Countless people were shocked. He killed the sword monarch with just one slash. How powerful was sword god Zhou now? They could all tell that the Frost King's icebound sword was not Zhou Xuanji's best sword, but it could still explode with such power. Shocking. Lin Guanyu turned around suddenly and slashed at Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji was prepared and blocked with both swords, but he was still pushed back. You want to kill me? You don't have that ability. Lin Guanyu laughed coldly, his eyes cold. On the other side, the sword monarch broke out of the ice and looked at Zhou Xuanji in fear. The Frost King's icebound sword flew back to Zhou Xuanji's side. He looked at Lin Guanyu, then at the sword monarch, and suddenly laughed. Both of you want to kill me? Why don't the two of you come at me together? Zhou Xuanji laughed condescendingly, which caused all the spectators to open their eyes wide. Big brother. Don't be reckless. The little black snake cried out immediately. If Zhou Xuanji died, they would not be able to leave Great Zhou alive. Chongming Demon Monarch pulled him down and scolded, "Shut up. When has our master not been reckless before? But he is reckless, and he has the power to be reckless. Just watch." Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others stared at the little black snake with unfriendly gazes. Zhou Yalong cried out suddenly, "Sword Monarch. Don't be calculative now. Attack together." He was the one who invited the Sword Monarch to guard against the current situation. At the same time, he felt anxious in his heart. Why hadn't Zhong Kuiming appeared yet? These days, he had been praising Zhong Kuiming every day. Now that Zhong Kuiming had disappeared, he felt terrible. Of course, it was possible that Zhong Kuiming was waiting in the dark. The Sword Monarch immediately flew towards Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu. Lin Guanyu frowned and said, "Aren't you being too arrogant?" He was wary in his heart. This brat definitely did not have good intentions. Zhou Xuanji smiled and let go of his hands. The God Emperor sword and white dragon bone sword flew to his side. The God Emperor sword and white dragon on his body disappeared as well. Following this, a long sword that gave off a sinister aura appeared in his hand. Sky Extinguishing Sword. The moment this sword appeared, Lin Guanyu quickly retreated in fear. The Sword Monarch also stopped and looked at the Sky Extinguishing Sword in fear. Evidently, the sword that Zhou Xuanji took out was the most powerful sword that he thought he had. It could even kill the two of them with a single strike. This sword is called Sky Extinguishing Sword. It can bury the heavens and destroy the Great Dipper of the world. Zhou Xuanji said with a loud laugh. He held the sword with one hand and the dozens of legendary swords behind his back, looking incredibly domineering. After that, he gripped the sword with both hands and twisted his body. He bent down and furiously slashed out. Boom! A black sword chi swept toward Lin Guanyu with incredible speed. Lin Guanyu's expression changed drastically. Unable to dodge, he instinctively raised his saber to block. The sword chi swept past and shattered the saber's blade. His body was engulfed by the black sword chi, and not even his bones were left. The sword chi swept out, and everyone on both sides felt as if they were facing death. In the blink of an eye, the sword chi flew 10,000 meters away and destroyed the palace. Dust flew everywhere, and the entire Great Zhou's royal city violently shook. Silence. Everyone looked at Zhou Xuanji dumbfounded, including Xiao Jinghong, Daoya Old Man, Zhao Zongjian, and the others. Even Emperor Yan of Zhou opened his eyes wide, as if he had seen a ghost. The Sword Monarch's face turned pale, and his body stiffened. Chapter 201. How is this possible? Zhou Yalong was dumbfounded, muttering to himself, his body trembling uncontrollably. That was Lin Guanyu. She was his greatest backer. Baba Blade Master. He was instantly killed just like that. Tens of millions of people were shocked by Zhou Xuanji's domineering sword strike. At that moment, the ascension platform suddenly split open. The crack that was thousands of feet long split the ascension platform into two halves. Countless pieces of sand and stones rained down on the imperial city. The civil and military officials and guests quickly retreated in fear, staying far away from Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji maintained the posture of swinging his sword. He looked domineering, but he was actually weak. Damn! Isn't this too fierce? His face was expressionless, but he exclaimed in his heart. It was not because of the power of the sky-extinguishing sword, but because it had consumed too much of his spiritual power. He was almost emptied in an instant. Fortunately, the Tianxia map began to take effect. It provided him with an endless supply of spiritual power, so he did not collapse. As expected of an ancient treasure, it was awesome. Zhou Xuanji inwardly rejoiced. Even though the Heavenly Soul legendary swords were powerful, the price was too great. No wonder it could only be used by those at astral projection. If he was only at the 10th level of the nascent soul realm, he would have died on the spot. He glanced over and saw that the sword monarch was already scared out of his wits. Awesome! Do you know how powerful I am now? Just as he was feeling pleased, a shocking uproar broke out in the great Zhou imperial city. Lin Guanyu is dead? Oh my god! What was with that sword just now? Am I seeing things? What a terrifying sword technique. Even though I'm so far away from that black sword chi, I still feel like I'm facing death, so, Zhou Xuanji had been hiding his strength all along. Just how powerful is he? Perhaps even if Emperor Yan of Zhou personally came, he would not be able to defeat him. Everyone was talking excitedly, and most of them were so excited that their faces were red. Chongming Demon Monarch and the little black snake howled in excitement. Zhao Congjian clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. That's amazing. He also wanted to learn this sword move. Xiao Jinghong took a deep breath. He realized that he could not see through Zhou Xuanji more and more. He had watched Zhou Xuanji grow up every day, but Zhou Xuanji's power far exceeded his expectations. The other side, and Daoya old man clapped his hands in delight. Xuanji is really too powerful. How can I catch up to him? Jiang Shui sighed, but her face was filled with pride. Although she wanted to protect Zhou Xuanji was so powerful, so how could she not be happy? Su Xianxian and Zhang Lanya were overjoyed. The former was purely pleasantly surprised, while the latter was trying to rope Zhou Xuanji in. Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. The great general of the state, Shitan Changsher, glanced at him from time to time, then at Zhou Xuanji, as though he was thinking about something. Lu Longlin was so excited that he murmured to himself in a trembling voice, Top 100 of the Northern Wilderness. Northern Wilderness Top 100. He had personally received Zhou Xuanji and nominated him for the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. If he also nominated him for the Northern Wilderness Top 100, his position in the Shanghai Ziggurat would skyrocket. Just thinking about it made him feel as if the pinnacle of his life had arrived. Yang Zhongtian sighed. If not for Xian Xianghua, they would have been able to rope in Zhou Xuanji back then. What a pity, what a pity. Zhou Yalong was frightened to the point of retreating repeatedly. His expression was one of unwillingness, hatred, terror, and disbelief. At that moment, he was completely panicking. Zhou Xuanji looked at the sword monarch and coldly laughed as he said, "Old coarse fellow, what else do you have to say? Wasn't this old fellow trying to show off? Keep pretending. From today onwards, you will no longer be a standard by which I measure my enemy's strength. You're too weak." Zhou Xuanji inwardly felt quite pleased, but his expression was calm. The calmer he looked, the more panicked the sword monarch became. What, you don't dare to speak anymore? Zhou Xuanji said as he disdainfully laughed. He purposely tried to stall for time and wait for his spirit energy to recover. It had to be said that the Tianxia map was incredibly domineering. With this endless supply of spirit energy, it would not be long before his spirit energy completely recovered and he could once again unleash the sky-extinguishing sword. The sword monarch's expression was grim, and he did not know what to say. He would either lose face or die. That sword strike just then was simply too terrifying. Looking at Zhou Xuanji, it was evident that he could unleash a second strike. I'll count to 3. Either you tell me that senior is powerful, that I'm ashamed of my inferiority, and that I shouldn't have interfered, or you can die, Zhou Xuanji said as he sinisterly laughed. Zhou Xuanji said with a sinister smile. After that, he began counting down. When he counted to 2, the sword monarch's body trembled. He immediately cried out, "Senior is powerful, that I'm ashamed of my inferiority, and that I shouldn't have interfered." After that, he left dejectedly. He fled extremely quickly, afraid that he would be too slow. Zhou Xuanji looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou and said, "You have your own rules. After all, you are the emperor. At first, I hated you, but now, I understand your difficulties." Hearing this, Emperor Yan of Zhou smiled. His son had grown up. Actually, it was not a bad idea to pass the position of emperor to Zhou Xuanji. But I will not forgive you. Our relationship as father and son has already been severed. Me killing your son has nothing to do with our previous relationship. Today, I will kill him in front of you. Let's see if you will choose to ascend or save your son. Zhou Xuanji continued to speak before walking toward Zhou Yalong. Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression froze. The slap in the face came too quickly, and he did not expect it. Once he began to ascend, he could not back out. If he stepped out of the sunlight, he would no longer have the opportunity to ascend, and his lifespan would only be 100 years. Nothing was absolute. Perhaps there was another way, but it was too difficult. No one could give up, and it could even be said that they dared to give up. Zhou Yalong panicked. He immediately cried out, "Zong Kuiming. Why aren't you coming out? Hanin Divine Sect, why aren't you coming out? Are you going to watch me be killed by this sinner?" He did not beg for mercy because he understood that begging for mercy was useless. Either he would die or Zhou Xuanji would die. He did not even have any hope of escaping. Zhang Lanya fell silent. A wise man submits to circumstances. Her gaze was gentle as she looked at Zhou Xuanji, and the more she looked, the more satisfied she became. Seeing her expression, Su Xianxian immediately understood. Her face became bright red, and with her heavy makeup and wedding dress, she looked as beautiful as a painting. At that moment, a figure appeared in front of Zhou Xianlong. It was Zong Kuiming. Seeing him, Zhou Yalong let out a sigh of relief. Shitan Changshu slightly frowned and could not help but look at Emperor Yan of Zhou in the sky. Zong Kuiming began to size up Zhou Xuanji, his gaze incredibly oppressive. He suddenly laughed and said, "Your spirit energy is already lacking, so you're just a paper tiger." Hearing this, everyone's eyes widened. Zhou Xuanji slightly narrowed his eyes and stopped walking. Zong Kuiming, another one of the Northern Wilderness top 100, Daoya old man frowned, feeling a headache coming on. Zhou Xuanji's life, wasn't it too unlucky? He was only 22 years old, and he had already encountered so many of the Northern Wilderness top 100, so he was pretending. No wonder he let the sword monarch go. Quickly cripple him. I'm going to kill him myself. Zhou Yalong said excitedly. He could no longer care about the crown prince's demeanor, and his face and neck were red from excitement. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.